And so, look, what I'd love to start with, I know we were talking before we sort of hit record, was difficult conversations. And I think the climate right now with inflation, it's harder for brands to raise money. It's harder to get the rate of sale going because consumers have less money to spend. Hard to put price increases through. And there's a quote I love by Tim Ferriss, which is, "You are the sum of difficult conversations you have, both with yourself and with other people." I think it's quite a good truism of life. But I'd love you to take us to the apex of, on your journey and your whole list of illustrious brands, of what's been the most difficult conversation you've had to have with a retailer. Don't have to say the retailer, obviously. And one, why was it so hard? And then two, how did you prep for that conversation?
Okay, there's been a few of those.
Yeah.
Over the, I think that's the first thing to say. We're certainly in a climate at the moment where there are more difficult conversations than ever. Perhaps we've been in a phase in more recent years where the market has been booming and there's been a very warm welcome for challenger brands. So there's perhaps been less of those conversations, but things have come to a head in recent times, whether it's because of the economic factors or retailers looking to simplify ranges rather than add to them. So there's no doubt about it that all of us in the industry are having more of those challenging chats than perhaps we've had. I think the key to them is about good preparation. And I think one of the things that you learn over the years is there's no point kind of ignoring these hard truths, and when there is a difficult conversation to be had, you've got to prep well for it, but there's no point then having a half an hour chat with someone before you get to it. So I think people respect you for getting straight to the point, really. That's the first thing in any difficult conversation. I think it's best to...
So what would you say, literally, if you take...
Well, if you're giving somebody feedback, for example, and we all get feedback from different people. So I think it's important to be kind. It's always important to be kind and show the right sort of respect for people. But actually, most of the time, it's just really important to sort of say to somebody, would you mind if I gave you some feedback, or I've been watching this, and could we talk about that? And then immediately someone is sort of opens up the door for you to perhaps make a few tough points or challenging points. So just creating that sort of softer opening, if you like, and just making sure that you're in a safe environment where you can talk about those more challenging topics, but then actually getting straight to it. And I think having hard conversations is tricky, isn't it? But the worst thing you can do is kind of warm someone up to there's some bad news coming here, or it's a trip, and then but not actually.
Get to it. I had that the other day.
Get to it early on. It's awful for it, but it's awful. It's awful for everybody involved. Yeah. So someone's about to delist your product, or I don't know, kind of cancel an arrangement that you thought you got or something like that, but you kind of know something's probably not right. So it's best to get straight through it. So I think people, and my boss at Pret, a guy called Clive Schley, once said to me that if you've got these difficult moments, the trick is to sort of be almost ruthless in how you get to the point, ruthless in your decision making and in calling out the topic, but good generosity of spirit and kindness.
Is there an example of that?
Well, I think the toughest one is usually people related, when you might feel that you need to make changes
team related
in a team. So people's always that's much harder than a conversation around price increases or trade, because that's sort of slightly less personal. But when it involves people, that's always
that's what Tom from Gale said, because out of everything he's ever done, that's the hardest thing. And as I said, I've got this at the minute. I'm asking these questions selfishly, right? It's but how do you go about? So you said get straight to the point. What else?
Well, I think having good examples that bring to life, why you might have the concerns, rather than just I've got concerns. Actually, making sure you have some sort of good examples that maybe the person doesn't fully accept all of those, but at least you are sharing why you've reached a particular point of view, or why something has become a concern for you. Then it's less about personality and it's more about facts and real things that are happening. So you don't need a long list of them, because nobody wants to listen to a long list of not to work. But I think having one or two things that you have prepared and thought about that are perhaps good illustrations or examples of why things might not be going quite as well. And usually what you find in those conversations is things are not going very well for the other person either. So actually sometimes it's a huge relief that these topics have finally been aired. But I do think So if you're making a decision that a change is required, certainly in a team, ruthless about, really worry about it and think about it. But once you've made your decision, ruthless decision making, but sort of generous in execution.
When was the time where you ruminated on it for too long?
Most of the time, Dan, to be honest, because I think there are people I don't think there are many people that get their kicks out of reorganising and cutbacks and firing. I mean, there's no joy in any of that. But I think there's been many instances. I tend to. I feel like I get a feel pretty early on if something isn't working. But then
when you say feel,
well, just in your gut, you just kind of know that this isn't going quite as I hoped, and then you sort of go through the phase of, this is just going to require a bit of time for it to come right, or is there actually is this never going to come right? And my style would probably be to give it a go and see whether it works. Yeah. So I would be in that camp. But I think what I've learned over the years is to not give it 4 or 5 goes, or not give it 12 months to get right. If those concerns are deep, and those concerns may not be just about that individual, it might be their fit with the business that they're being employed by, or the type of role they have to do at that time might just not be quite clicking for them. So there's sometimes ways that you can...
It's almost like getting a defender to play up top.
Absolutely.
John Terry ain't going to be Harry Kane. To put it in.
But sometimes through sometimes by a bit of a sort of rearrangement of who's going to go wing back rather than centre back, all of a sudden you unleash this great player again, and they might find that they really hit their form and that it can still work. But just leave it if things are not working and you don't do anything about it. You kind of know it's not working, but you keep dwelling on it and delaying having the conversations. That's no good for the person, and also no good for the business, and no good for you, because actually if you've got any kind of
Where's an example where you've... Because again, I was telling you I've got that at the minute, so I've got... don't mind me saying this, I've got an amazing person at Systems who's an absolute genius, but he's doing marketing for us at the minute. It's just not the right sort of fit, but but he's incredible. Like, what have been what sort of, again, patterns that you've seen what are the sort of common misfits in businesses, and then how can you sort of rearrange your almost sort of Pep Guardiola style here, is bring someone on, how do you do that? What's the common
like Pep would do. I mean, maybe not at the moment because he's got a few challenges with his City team, but he's got a clear way of wanting to play, a clear strategy. So that comes first. It's the team and it's the philosophy and all the business strategy. That's the thing that you need to articulate, and then describe how people might, what are the tasks or jobs or roles that need doing within that, and how people might fit into that philosophy.
So philosophy first, and then tactics,
strategy, and what we're talking about. This in a business or on the football context.
Sure.
But I think it is, what's the business trying to do? Therefore, what are the key milestones or areas that it needs to up its game on? Or
what would you say sort of your philosophy is as a kind of linking football to brand building, in terms of so Pep Guardiola's got a very unique style, as does Jurgen Klopp, death metal football, as does Arne Slot, very slightly more sort of calm. And I think you do see this through challenger brands. It's someone like Amelia at Boldbean, that is just a go-getter. Let's absolutely fucking have it sort of attitude.
But there's a strategy there, and
there's a strategy. But then there's also probably a slightly different texture with, I don't know, someone like... Well, probably, your style, the way you guys do things is probably very different to her in some sense. But what would you say that's...
we're not as good. We're nowhere near as good as Amelia is on social media and all those wonderful things that she does.
You've built this brand, but what would you say that sort of style and philosophy you and William have sort of trying to imbue in the team? And because...
Well, I think we have a sort of consistent track record of the type of businesses and brands that we like to get involved with, and there's a common thread which is all about the quality of the food and drink that we're selling. So for us, that I don't think any of us can almost turn up for work unless we believe in the product. That's our fundamental start point. So we don't start with social media, or we don't start
brand.
I think product before brand, because I think you can layer a brand around a product. I mean, I always look, if I'm looking at investing in a brand or a product, the perfect thing to find is what's a really great tasting, ideally differentiated product that is just dreadfully presented in terms of the branding, because that's kind of, you feel you can go to work and make an instant improvement on that, whereas going and changing the branding of a product that really doesn't deliver very much is unlikely to get you, extraordinary results over time. So,
Yes.
so we're product people, I would say. So our marketing philosophy is all around.
It's also much easier to probably say, like, say you've said we've got this brand, people have already tried it, and they're saying, oh, we've sort of jigged our product. It's a much harder thing to say, like, this tastes great. By the way, we've just hit the bells and whistles,
rejigged it,
kicked them through Top Man sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also just. It's not just the presentation of the brand. It's a bigger question around how it's positioned and what's the purpose.
Positioned.
Well, who it's targeting. What's its point of view. What's the story of the brand? I mean, Green and Blacks, which I was involved with many years ago now. But I mean that's probably the best case study in my career of a brilliant tasting chocolate brand. But at the time, it was almost presenting itself as if you'd like to save the planet, please come and join us and enjoy our chocolate. That was the sales pitch. And therefore it was appealing to a very minority audience. Meanwhile, this was the most fabulous tasting chocolate with all the right organic and ethical sort of principles behind it. So we said there, actually, we don't want to be a save the planet chocolate. We want to be an exciting, stylish brand within premium chocolate, because we thought the UK needed better quality chocolate. So that's same product, same brand name, but a change of target audience, really. We're going to behave like a chocolate brand rather than a sort of fair trade brand, as perhaps Green and Blacks was labelled at that time. And that led the entire narrative for the company. It led all of the recruitment. So all of a sudden we'd be interested in people that had got, if we were recruiting sales team people, we hired a really great guy, Simon, who he worked for 10 years at Lindt, and he'd been one of the early pioneers of bringing that more sort of European style chocolate to a market that previously had only really had Cadbury. So he understood.
Whereas previously, if you positioned it like it was, you'd probably be hiring yogis, for example. Like that's very
no, but that's exactly it. You'd be hiring people that were already sort of converts, but converts on the perhaps ethical attributes of the brand, but didn't really understand the chocolate market. So which market are you really competing in? Then how do you tell your story around great taste or organic and ethical fair trade in Green and Black's case, in a pioneering way that sets you apart from all the other chocolate brands? So you're not throwing away all of these attributes, you're just reordering them and pointing them. That's really what I mean by positioning.
Yeah, because I think I was saying to you before, I've just read that Seth Godin's book on This Is Strategy, and I think it's fascinating. The sort of one sentence he says is, he goes, pick your customers, pick your future, pick your competitors, pick your future. And he's actually like, by saying like let another chocolate brand, i.e. for example Ombar, let them serve them, and actually saying your competitors should become your colleagues, because you're saying that you're not for us, but this brand here is amazing. And it's like, and when you get so good at positioning, is basically what he's saying, is you get to a position where you can actually recommend your competitors. So when you go into this positioning document, like with yourself and William, like what's actually written down, like talk me through to like almost like the Magna Carta of.
Well, it starts out with just a raft of post-it notes and random thoughts that we all have, because we're.
What were some of those thoughts, do you reckon, if you can remember?
Well, back in Green and Black's days, they were all around the this tension between ethical and quality, and we're going back 15 plus years now, but at that moment in time, totally different to now, where you've got a really trendy contemporary brand like Tony's doing amazingly well in chocolate, which kind of was almost the original Green and Black's positioning. But back then, that had such niche appeal. It was ahead of its time, really, that you couldn't really make a business out of that positioning. And if you asked customers, and we did, it's always important that you talk to trade customers and talk to people that are users of your brand as well, is always invaluable. But try and have those conversations yourself, rather than asking some researcher to go and do it for you. Go and hear it straight. And when I remember doing the Green and Blacks ones, and I was thinking of doing research as well, try and find people that are sort of super fans who are in love with your brand, and then talk to people that you go, well, what, Dan, he should be a buyer of this brand, but for whatever reason he's completely rejecting it. It's not on his radar, he's rude about it or whatever. So get your fans, and then get your doubters, and don't bother with the people in the middle, really, and then work out what is it about the brand that the super fans actually like, and then why is the brand not connecting with people that you would consider to be in scope and in target as future buyers of the brand.
Yeah, because that reminds me of which Rory Sutherland was telling me about, is that inversion rule, where it's like, don't ask the question. It's Charlie Munger's inversion rule. So ask the question back to front. So it's like, and you've done that. So it's like, on the one side, it's like, why are you buying us? And why are you obsessed with us? and then fuck the middle off and say, why are you not buying us? What were the insights you took from people that weren't buying you, which then developed that positioning piece?
Well, there were some great. I remember I did 2 focus groups down in Brighton and two in North London. I remember going to them all, and they were a bit amateur the way we did them, to be honest. But we gave people a glass of wine and free chocolate, so they turned up and were prepared to have the chat. But there was some surprises out of it, in that the super fans of the brand, who we thought would be the green champions, but I love this brand because it's the pioneering organic brand. Nearly all of them said the reason that may have been what I noticed about the brand, but the reason I love the brand and keep buying it is it's demonstrably better on taste than anything else in the market. So actually, they weren't buying the brand really because of its ethical credentials. That may have got it on their radar, but they were repeat buyers because the taste and quality was so good. Then you talk to the people that we were trying to get, the chocolate Dan, and they would say to us that actually this chocolate looks so worthy that it's taken you've killed all the joy. Chocolate's about pleasure and indulgence. You look like you're a kind of do-gooder almost, and I just think you're going to taste terrible, and I'm not wasting I remember one lady, I'm not wasting my chocolate credits on you.
Sure.
Because actually you look sort of like you gathering dust in the corner of a health food shop, and you've got all the right worthy creds. But when I'm having a chocolate treat, I want the indulgence and the pleasure and the joy from that. And what we learned at that particular focus group at the end, we kind of declared where we were from, and I actually said to this lady, would you mind actually, we've paid for tonight and worked for this little company called Green and Blacks, and you've been actually not too complimentary about the bars that are on the table. And she'd pretty much, all these ladies had pretty much eaten every other chocolate bar apart from Green and Blacks, which was left on the table, even though it was going free. I said, please try it. It's really good. You can trust me. And they tried it, and I can't believe it. This tastes great, but I didn't expect it to. So we'd unearthed really the barrier, which was that the organic and ethical presentation in people's minds equaled low quality, not very tasty.
Yeah.
So we came out of that and said, actually, we've got the most fantastic product here. People are interested in the ethical attributes, but we've got it in the wrong order. So the first thing we did was commission a rebrand of the presentation of Green and Blacks, which we did within, it's kind of quite a big project. It was a 5 or 6 month piece of work before we got it out there. And we went from, I say to people, we went from like being the market leader of organic chocolate to being a total nobody in premium chocolate. So we probably got 98% share of a organic chocolate market, which wasn't much of a market, to being a 0.001%. But all of a sudden, lots to play for. And you are able to try. You're then in recruitment mode. How do I spread the word and get more people to come in the brand? And that was our sort of rallying cry. Sample the chocolate, much more effective than talking about it. We found that actually get people to try it overcame all the barriers and the doubts that people might have. So we probably spent 7 years giving away free chocolate and telling the story, really. And that brand. Well, back in the day was quite a trailblazer.
I think one of the quintessential OG challenger brands for sure.
But going back to your football,
so just go upstream. Yeah. So back to the sort of Green and Blacks Magna Carta. I get so from that feedback, because there's loads of nuance in this.
Yeah.
What do you actually write in the fucking document? Because the amount of people I've spoken to who are trying to position themselves, and it's the whole thing of don't be all things to all people.
Yeah.
So you get that wonderful. You're in North London, you're in Brighton, you get this gorgeous feedback. Taking that and actually saying this is where we're going to put our flag down, and then we'll go on to the Pep philosophy stuff. Like, what was actually in that document?
It was a sort of a debrief almost of what we'd heard and what we thought, and it was it was reasonably structured, but it was a kind of brain dump of these are the things we think we're hearing about our brand. And by the way, this from a business point of view is what we'd like to do with this. What was brand.
The business? Yeah, what from the business side, like what does that look like?
Well, that was a sort of an outline at least of the level of growth ambition that we had in terms of the size of the business. And all when you're doing those plans is it's a direction of travel. The numbers will be wrong, but we were not looking to take Green and Blacks from a 0 to 100 million brand in 3 years. It was like, how do you take it from nowhere to, I think, where do we get? We got to, and by the time we sold the business, it was doing 25 million, and it was growing, really quickly year on year. But we wouldn't have really dreamt of that when we were doing this research. So you don't need to get too far ahead, but you just need to say the brief was actually position this chocolate brand so it can compete in the premium chocolate market. That's the heart of the brief.
Yeah.
And then you need to work with talented creatives who can show you how to do that rather than telling them how to do it. That's the thing. You share the problems and share it warts and all. Don't try and sort of dress it up too fancily. Just get it down and tell the truth almost.
Yes.
So you're sharing all the pain points as you see them. But remember, it's a brief. It's not a response to the brief. That's the people that you're working with that can then digest. I think that's where I read a lot of briefs where people kind of share the problem, but then also write 7 pages on, by the way, here's the answer, and can you draw it for me? And I think actually you need to get the creative talent in at the earlier stage and just talk to them about the more underlying things that are true with that business, and then work closely with them. But the creative process and the briefing process with, sometimes in the marketing world with agencies, is too elongated in my opinion, and it goes through account managers, planners, different layers of people on the client side, and then at the end of the chain, the creative director kind of might read it and go, why have I got 35 pages of all this waffle from client brief, and we need to just distill this and get to the heart of the task. But if you can get those people close earlier on, have them listen to the feedback, and get them as an extension of your team, then I think you get better results all the time. So that's something we've always tried to do, is invest in creative, which could be advertising people or great storytellers, whether it's PR or social media, and certainly design, and get them really close. Doesn't mean they're always working 100% for the business. They might be freelance or they might work for an agency, but get them to join the team rather than view them as a supplier. And it's surprising one of the truths with bigger agencies and creative providers is that you've got, the bigger agencies are often doing a lot of work that pays the bills extremely well for big corporate clients, but it's not always the most exciting work. So within the agency, the creatives are desperate to work on something more interesting that's probably lower fee income, but is the thing they tell their friends about, they put on their portfolio. So if you've got an interesting food or drink product or brand that needs some help, you can access top level help quite easly, actually, because I think there's a real appetite.
Who are some of the big agencies you reckon you could reach out to that you recommend?
Well, there's, you know some of them well. There's some of them that have made a career out of challenger food and drink. Pearl Fisher were the agency that did the Green and Blacks rebrand. They also work with us on Cawston Press. There's a great agency called Here Design. We did an LA brewery with them. Big Fish and Perry, who's got the most amazing list of triumphs that he's had over the years. JKR would be a bigger agency that have done a lot of very iconic design in food and drink.
What have they done?
What have they done? God, that's a good question. You're testing me out. Well, in the challenger scene, they were the people that their ventures division did. Hippies was one of the brands that they developed. They did the branding for Ugly Drinks early on, but they've done a lot of work from it. They did the famous design on Invitted Jaffa Cakes in the North. Wow. Is that really iconic one? I think they have done Stella over the years. They've done some of the Heinz designs. They've done big corporate FMCG design. But again, there's talented creatives in agencies like that want to work on something a bit more emerging rather than just big company, because they can do more to it.
Yes.
It's quite tough to change a really big brand, because whilst a client might like the idea of changing the Coca-Cola design.
What happened to Jaguar recently?
And the corporate system's almost designed to stop people making changes rather than doing anything too brave. So there's more fun to be had in smaller brands generally. When I worked at Pret, the creative team was, when I arrived at Pret as the marketing director, the creative team was already in place and was inside the company rather than agency. And that for me was, it was like a kid in a sweet shop. All of a sudden, creative team are kind of an extension of the marketing team, and you sit next to them so you can actually see how they work. Some of the happiest times of my...
How's the marketing team different from the creative team? I always get that confused. What marketing be doing and what should... Because I think, as you say, it can get convoluted where the marketing team want to do creative stuff. And actually, I think what you're saying here, mate, in terms of position, in terms of positioning, in terms of the brand strategy, but also in terms of positioning people on the pitch, it's like, how do you separate those two things? Because in my head, they're kind of
interlinked. Well, I think it's the best results come when they are interlinked.
Right.
Which actually bigger company processes try and separate them out. But actually, if you can so when you're thinking about business planning meets how do we position a brand, to get somebody with the right, creative bandwidth into those conversations early is pure gold if you've got the right people. So rather than waiting until the client's kind of done all that planning work and then you go and get somebody to do amazing design, I think getting getting a senior creative or a creative thinker into the planning stage. And they're not designing anything at that point, but they're just a contributor to how the brand might be expressed. Then it goes into more the creative function, shall we say, which is perhaps more of the development of the design and the assets.
Yes.
I mean, if it's packaging, it's design work. But I think there's a mistake often made in that there's such fantastic, talented people that work in these design businesses or advertising businesses, but they only kind of get a phone call when there's a media budget to do an ad campaign, whereas actually if you get their thinking earlier, more upstream and earlier in the brand's development, they can help you articulate and express the brand. And you can get them thinking about, what might an ad campaign look like? You've got no money to do the ad campaign, but you get them behaving and thinking like, that would be like this.
Surreal, I don't know the guy's name.
Yes.
Innocent. Like, he's clearly involved in those meetings.
Yeah.
And I don't know who I said this to, but I genuinely believe like a graphic designer is probably a really underrated hire in challenger brands. Like James Tyler, who does local, they call him the brand man. Like obviously when we're at the pub, it's a bit of a piss take, but he is so creative. And like and I genuinely think there's kind of a small brand at the minute, but that'll get bigger. But the activations he can come up with to like turn pubs on and stuff, and get the pull through is genius because he's got that brain. But he's obviously a founder. But I think there's a real people are always looking for the underrated, like the national account manager or I think there's something about having someone in house who can just pull creative stuff quickly, especially now with social media.
Totally agree, and. But that could be on food development and new product development and innovation programs, or it could be on the brand positioning. But getting those, feeling like you've got top quality creative brains on the task, but upstream and early, but also that those people they're kind of sitting on your side of the table rather than they're not trying to sell you an ad campaign at that point. They're joining they're joining the sort of the thinking process to work out how to put a brand on a map, because it might be that the most important piece of creative work you do in the early days as a challenger brand is the press drop or how you deliver the samples to a prospective trade buyer. Now, rather than that being done by being left to a junior to do, because it doesn't sound like a very glamorous task, it's like, well, why can't you do the greatest ever piece of direct mail and give it as much love as if you were doing a TV ad? And so the media budget might be different, but just because it's a lower cost item, why do you have to get D-list people doing it? Why can't you get a bit of an A-list person in early? Now, do you need the A-lister to be on the payroll 5 days a week? Probably not, and you can't afford that anyway. But there are ways of, getting a bit of their time. And interestingly, what's happening, I think, in the creative world is so much talent is actually leaving kind of agencies and corporate environments and just going solo, going freelance. So you can get access to some superbly talented people. You can pay them well so they're happy, but they haven't got to pay for their office or their reception or their team of 10 account managers.
Also they've got the chill. They haven't got a boss breathing down their neck.
They've got a boss. So
it's a real Well, as I say, we use freelancers for everything at Hungry. Amazing people.
No, because I think what you can't do as a small company, let's be honest. I mean, whilst we'd all like to have a team that sort of has a similar structure and look to a corporate, you can't afford that. But I think rather than trying to do a bad version of a corporate organisation, you just say, what are the must-have roles we have to have, and then how do we get creative about getting bits of.
What are those must-haves?
Well, I think the must-haves are. I mean, you have to have some sales skills, because without sales skills, there's no revenue. You need to have, you do need to have resource, and again, you can argue whether you need it all full time or not. But I think somebody finance and operations, or both of those, they're not the same thing, but they tend to work quite closely together to make sure that your product is safe and that you're procuring it or making it in sensible quantities, and a finance person that actually doesn't tell you what happened last month. I mean, that's useful to know, but actually is again part of the planning process and is working with you on developing something that has a chance of having value later down the line. So, too much finance in early stage businesses is the local accountancy firm that sends you the accounts 6 weeks after. I mean, what's the point of that really? You need real-time information, but what you really need is your finance business partner, whoever that is, to be part of the conversation around the trade margins and challenging on pricing early on. And most of the value is added right at the start, because that's where you design something that if you're then going to roll it out, raise investment, if you've made some mistakes early on around structural margins or...
What are some of those common mistakes?
Well, pricing's I mean, I think, Giles, who has been on your podcast a few times, I mean, he and I worked together actually when we both started our career in the same year at KP Snacks. He was selling them and I was marketing them. So it's interesting listening to his, take on the businesses that he's now involved with. But I think the biggest single mistake that businesses make is pricing. So they get the pricing wrong from the start. And then the second mistake linked to that is that it'll all be all right later because the volumes will be great and then we'll get a massive reduction in cost of goods once we're through that. But it rarely happens. You will get some efficiencies over time, but as he said on the recent podcast that you did, I mean, you should get some efficiencies, but surprise, surprise, as you're getting bigger, you're getting greater demands from your trade customers because you're no longer just a startup with no funds at all and they want their slice of the action. So you're having to, in order to grow, you're having to put more investments into your trade customers and your consumer marketing. So any savings you might have had on cost of goods are sort of reinvested into that area. So starting with pricing that is just too cheap really for the quality of product that you might be producing. I'm talking more about, a premium brand here.
Sure.
That's the biggest mistake.
What are your, I think Giles says 45% gross margin, like what's you sort of, this links us to your sort of style or your Pep Guardiola approach. Like how are you sort of,
I think it depends on the category that you're in. So, if there's a business that is where nearly all of the sales go through the grocery channel, arguably your central overheads to service that business don't need to be too substantial. You need a sales team, but you don't need a field sales team.
Central overheads, what do you mean?
So your payroll costs really. So people that are, full-time or full-time equivalent employees, so your headcount within the business, because there aren't, 25 grocery customers. Sure. The thing that will move the dial is good account management, but then having the investment to spend with those customers rather than having a big team of people. You might need to buy some data, and that data might be more valuable than another headcount at that point. So on a business like that, where 90% of the sales go through the big 5-6 grocery multiples, you can have quite a lean central system to service that in terms of the number of people, and the accounting's very simple because you haven't got hundreds of customers. A soft drinks company, I mean, if I compare, Green and Black's was grocery and sort of specialty retail channels. Cawston Press, similar sized business now, but is spread across many, many more channels. So we've got cans of rhubarb selling in multi-packs in Sainsbury's, Tesco, Waitrose and the multiples, but we've got drinks available in pubs, coffee shops, all of the out-of-home channels, and you have to cover more ground. So a business like that needs a larger sales organisation to cover the ground successfully. Therefore, bigger central overhead costs, and in order to fund that, you probably need a higher gross margin.
So what would you say gross margins, like gold gross margins in grocery versus out-of-home would be?
Well, I think if you can start with a gross margin that's in the high 40s, that's helpful. And then off that, you then deduct warehousing and distribution costs to get your product to wherever it needs to get to. Again,
that's the whole sort of GM1, GM2.
Yeah, they're just different grades of gross margin. So the first levels, if we said high 40s, that's really the price that you've got for those goods from the customer minus the cost of producing that product. The next level of gross margin is after warehousing and distribution, so the cost of delivering it to the customer. So say you were making 45 at the first level, then you might find that you've then got another 7 or 8 margin points come off to cover the costs of all your warehousing and distribution to customers. Those costs will be higher if you're delivering to lots of smaller customers, and they'll be lower if you're doing fewer distribution drops to the supermarkets. So supplying lots of independents, much more expensive, and you've probably got a wholesaler margin in that chain as well. Sure. Whereas you can go direct in bigger drops to a supermarket customer. So that's when I say the category as a varying. So you've gone from 45, maybe then you've gone down to 37, 38% after distribution. And that's probably what most people would sort of call their gross margin. But then you've got the next cost, which is, what are the costs of investment with a particular customer? And that might be another 5 to 10 margin points. So you started at 45, you've gone down to 37, and then maybe another 7 or 10 margin points off. So suddenly you're at high 20s. And we would call that contribution to central overheads. And out of that number, you've got...
Sorry, contribution to central overheads.
So that's the contribution. So it's gross margin after distribution and after the spend that you have made with a particular customer in order to get those sales. Sure. So like your trade investment level. and that leaves you with a sum of money that you don't have to pay for everything else from that. So all of the head office costs, all of the team costs, the marketing costs, general marketing costs, not the cost of a promotion in Sainsbury's, but the cost of, me wanting to do a nice big poster of a rhubarb ad in central London, and sampling costs and all of those things. And I think the point that has been made by others on your podcast is if your gross margin starts at 25 and then you've got to deliver the product, so it's actually more like 16, 17, and then you've got to fund the trade costs, quite quickly you're down to a 10 to 15% contribution or true gross margin, and that isn't a lot. You've got to have a very, very, if you've got a 10 million. I can
see why a lot of people go into recruitment now, because it's just like,
well, food and drink's heavy lifting, isn't it?
It's heavy lifting.
You need people, you've got to fund working capital for stock. So there's no doubt about it, if you can have a higher gross margin, life's a lot easier. But I think the way I like to think about it is every business has choices up and down the P&L. And
what are some of those choices?
Well, choices are, we make a choice we've certainly made a choice on Cawston, because we're in a category that's basically got, competitors that sponsor the Olympics and have a gigantic marketing budgets and distribution powers. And we said, well, we just can't compete with that, but we can produce, we believe, a much tastier, cleaner, better drink. So we decided to put most of our marketing budget into cost of goods, because we put it into recipes. So a can, a Cawston sparkling drinks, half of it is pressed fruit juice, and that's how you get the sweetness all naturally. So our
cost of goods is your marketing.
Our cost of goods is our marketing in that case. Now, why would you do that? Just because you feel better about a nicer quality product? Partly that, because you're proud of selling it, and I think we like to be involved in businesses that we think we would like to buy. But the real reason for doing it is we think you just get to a much better product that's more likely to achieve repeat purchase time and time again. And if people are enjoying the product, that's what really determines whether they come back a second or a third time. And if they're doing that, you don't have to sponsor the Olympics to get yourself out of jail. So that's a choice.
That's a choice. What are some other choices you think?
Well, I think other choices are, let's talk about people versus trade investment. So jobs versus...
When you say trade investment, that's putting money into Sainsbury's. That's what you mean by that.
Yeah. So say you're running the sales team for a business, or the sales and marketing for a business, you haven't got, you've got limited or restricted funds, because we've all got to make choices. You might like to have a assistant account manager, or someone's currently looking after Tesco and Sainsbury's and they're a bit stretched, and actually, can we have another account manager, so they're each doing one? So that's one way of, and you might say, well, that's better because they've got more bandwidth, more time. But surprise, surprise, actually, the thing that really might move the dial with those customers is having the ability to support the brand in those customers through trade investment, or having some, really clear data that helps you argue for more distribution. So those are all investment choices. Do I want more people, more expensive Christmas party, lots more people coming, or do I want to actually run a lean ship in terms of number of people, and that leaves me a bit more spare cash to spend on driving the brand? Of course, we'd all like to do it all. Big companies can do it all, but you have to be choiceful.
When you've got that sort of dough to put towards trade, where would you sort of put that, do you think? Because again, you can spunk a fortune there pretty quickly. What actually moves the needle? What actually drives the rate of sale?
Well, promotions, they do, but they also promotions definitely do help you get trial for a brand, but it can be a slippery slope in that you get lots into them, and if you're too dependent on them, people only buy the brand when it's on promotion. So it has to be done with some care. But the good thing about a promotion is that it has some kind of sticker or shelf marker or whatever that brings it to the attention, and it's in all 500 stores with a group where you run that promotion. So actually it's quite cost efficient, and it does happen, and people do notice it. Whereas if you go and say, well, we'd like to do a tasting within a store, or a more involved activation, you might only be able to do 10 stores because it's the same cost. And then when it comes to the range review, the buyer's going, they're not giving you enough time really to say, well, actually it's brilliant what you did in those 10 stores, and yes, you proved you had a phenomenal rate of sale there, but I've actually looked at your total sales in the last 6 months, and I've divided it by the 500 stores that you're in, and your rate of sales actually very disappointing. So I'm taking your distribution from 500 to 200 or God
Such
forbid
a paradox.
to zero.
It's
So
like the wacky, wonderful, irreverent, esoteric sort of marketing activation is what does great on socials. What does putting up a fucking barker on your social media like ain't great. But if it's going to keep you in 500 Sainsbury stores, it's worth it. But it's a very, and that's why I love speaking to you, mate. You just sort of say it, what actually works.
but they're all marketing. But different things work for different brands. So sampling works extraordinarily well for green and blacks
Yeah.
because people didn't really know what high cocoa chocolate tasted like, and actually, the quickest way to convert a customer was not to do a promotion in the store, but was actually to do sampling in that case. Now, everybody says sampling works, but I promise you it works better on some products than others. Everybody likes a freebie, but does it actually persuade them to go and buy the product? It did in that particular case.
Take me to where we sort of started with that, with the hardest conversation you've had with the retailer and how you prepared for that.
Well, the hardest conversations, I think, are so many of those.
What was one when you absolutely shitting yourself when you walked through the door?
Well, on an early stage brand, I mean, most of the conversations are you're trying to persuade them to take the brand for the first time. So you're in, give us a break, give us a chance mode. So it's tough to get the face-to-face time, isn't it? So when you get that, it's the nervousness and the anxiety around making sure that you do a good job. And I mean, I think the biggest failing in those meetings, and I've been guilty of it, and hopefully you reflect and learn. I mean, you just go in with too much stuff, and you feel under pressure to get through your presentation or something. Where usually, I think the buyers are not expecting smaller brands to go in and be their category captain and show them all the data, but they want to fall in love with your brand, and they want to make sure they try the brand, and you want to be really clear around what you believe your role could be in the category and how you can help them develop their business. So just landing those critical points rather than feeling, in order to look professional, we've got to do a 25-slide deck. Just keep it short, but make sure it's a strong narrative and pitch. I think the conversations around, when you've gone in and you think, actually, we have now persuaded a retailer to totally step change the distribution of a brand, and then you realise, you think you've cracked it, and then actually realise now we've gone into more stores, we're not selling as well as we might hope. So those are the most awkward meetings where you have to go and defend and cling on to.
How do you prepare for that?
Well, the reality is, I mean, the data is the data, so it's either working or it's not. And if you're in a position where you think, the 500 stores, we've divided the total sales and we're doing 2.5 units a store a week, when we know we really should be doing 4 or 5, and all of a sudden you're in relegation trouble. What do you do? I mean, I think if you can, you need to sort of produce, rather than getting a total relegation, you need to argue for another chance, but another chance might not be in 500 stores. So how can you prove that in 250 stores you're working really well and almost steer them to that answer? So steer them to give yourself a bit of punishment, almost go in knowing and expecting the blow, but I've already sort of given them away.
Yeah,
to keep you in play.
North Star right now, because this basically what they do is they give small brands access to this data, which is usually abhorrently expensive.
It's very powerful to have.
Well, data's like, if you're going in talking all brand, it's like me speaking French to a Finnish person, right? Whereas data is the common language between the brand.
Certainly for the grocery channel. It's not always the case in other channels. I think in other channels you're often selling to people that might have even greater interest in in the food and drink item that you're selling and how it's made. But grocers, not to say there's not some great buyers out there that are very aren't knowledgeable about the products, but the language they talk is data and this category story. So always thinking about maybe preempting the problem and suggesting that your distribution perhaps takes a little step back as maybe you've gone a little bit too far too soon. So rather than sitting and waiting for knowing that you're going to get that call at some point, actually maybe getting ahead of it.
Yeah, what you said at the beginning, like straight in.
So I know that I've looked at the data. Be seen to be proactively managing your business, and I think actually there's a bit of course correction here that would help us all. Therefore, we'd like to recommend a slight adjustment to the distribution, but then also taking the opportunity to reinforce in macro terms and for the medium and long term why stocking this brand is still such a good idea for you as the customer. So
how did you use? So what's the difference between what's shopper data? Because they're shopper, because what I'm trying to understand is I'm was very anti-data.
Yeah.
But like, how did you guys? Because you built Green and Blacks to 25 million, right?
Yeah.
Like, at what role did the shopper data come in? Because I know we talked about the positioning in terms of like we're no longer this niche sort of organic brand, worthy brand. We're now this sort of premium brand. Like, how were you using that?
Well, things like Nielsen data, till data really, that just shows that'll show you what share of the category you've got and how many units you've sold, and on one SKU versus the next, and your share within a category. That's super important to have that data. But there's another form of data which is more tells you who's buying your brand. So, and that's often run off in connection with the loyalty programs that the dunnhumbies and the Nectar for Sainsbury's, that type of thing. And that's richer insights around not only have you sold 5 units in this store, but 4 of them have been bought by this customer profile who happens to. And then you can talk to they have pen portraits almost that describe the different segments of customers. And Tesco will have their version, Sainsbury's will, and all the retailers have their own.
Yeah.
Then you can talk knowledgeably about not only am I selling 5, you get beyond the spreadsheet. So, yes, we know we're doing 3.5 units, and it'd be nice to be doing 5 units or 10 units. But what we are able to describe is the person that is buying our brand isn't actually buying anything else from the category. So we're bringing new users to the category, or the customer that is over-indexing on our brand is a really golden kind of target customer for you, Sainsbury's. Then you want them in your stores, and by having our brand, it's another reason for them to come to Sainsbury's. So it's about who's buying your brand and how are they buying it, rather than just the sort of financial metric piece of data.
But then how do you use that to inform your marketing to build a bigger brand? Because I wrote this thing the other day about and Seth Godin calls it scaffolding. So when you start, most ideas start small and niche, right?
Yeah.
So, and he always says you need your smallest viable audience. Like who are your people are going to go?
Early advocates,
early adopters.
Yeah,
people are going to go to North London or Brighton and eat chocolate and red wine.
Yeah.
At some point, to get to 25 million or however you built it, that shopper, you'll still have those shoppers because there's your diehard fans.
But who are the next?
Who are the next ones?
Yeah.
But so how do you? So you get that shopper data, right? And it says, okay.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, someone who's like not our target shopper, who's not in our sort of our avatar of shopper, is now buying the product. How do you change your marketing to widen the net? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Well, you start out with,
with Green and Blacks.
Okay, we're back on such a long time ago, the chocolate thing, but it's still.
Well, maybe another.
No. It's a good example because it's exactly what we did on that brand. So, Green and Blacks, we found out in all of the major customers where we were stocked in the early days, and we had a handful of listings and not many flavours and not that many stores. But we did some work in particular with Tesco, who dunnhumby data back then was, very, very advanced, really. They were sort of first out of the blocks with these shopper insight kind of levels of data. And we found out that, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think Tesco at the time had maybe 12 or 13 sort of segments as how they broke down their customer base, not for chocolate, but for all shopping in a Tesco store. And they all had a description. And we found there were 2 groups that were the major buyers of Green and Blacks in the Tesco stores. And the first were something like, I think we labelled it as green cuisine or something like that. So there were people that were kind of interested in, they were interested in brands that with good clean ingredients and more natural brands. They were buying Green and Blacks. They were the green of Green and Blacks, the organic and the ethical. And then we also did incredibly well with people who were kind of connoisseurs and foodies, and that was one of the segments there. And they were also people that were buying nice wine in Tesco, and that they were probably doing more baking at home and they cooked more. So they were the foodies. But we added those 2 groups up, and I think in total, they represented about 10% of all Tesco shoppers. So it's kind of 90% that we weren't attracting. But we could see. You then look at the segments and you look at your brand and you say, well, who are the next credible audience that we could?
Who were they?
Go after. So they were less on the sort of ethical side, ethical and green side, and they were more just the sort of the next tier of foodies. Particularly, empty nesters were a key.
Empty nesters.
So, kind of families whose kids have left home.
Not me at the minute.
Exactly, no one leaves home.
Yeah.
But they're in normal economic times, these are the groups that, very interesting on Green and Blacks because they got more cash because they're not having to pay for their well, they are in your case, Dan. They're still funding you.
Mum's doing the old spag bowl stuff. So yeah.
So they can start spending some money on themselves.
Yeah.
They've got more time, so they're not darting around as much. So they're in home more. So a nice slab of chocolate at night with a glass of wine was an occasion and a treat. And the other magical kind of collision on that brand is we worked out that, I mean, Green & Black's was really higher cocoa chocolate, nearly all dark chocolate. And as people got older, their palate evolved in a way that they preferred the more bitter taste rather than the sweetness that maybe they'd grown up with from milk chocolate. So their propensity to buy higher cocoa chocolate kind of went up with age. So that would be the next sort of segment, and we'd say, well, actually, we can get another 7% of Tesco customers, not all 7%, but we can go after that segment. So you then, because of the data that they have, they can do a brilliant description of who those people are, where they live, how they shop, what newspapers they read in the days when people used to buy a newspaper, what magazines, what media they consume, what car they drive, what they do with their social lives. Do they go to... So, I mean, that crowd for Green & Blacks were going to sort of local food festivals and wine clubs, and they were going to these outdoor Jules Holland picnic concerts and things like that. So all of a sudden we said, well, we'd like to attract that segment. So we will pinpoint our marketing to raise awareness of Green & Blacks against that group.
So what were some of those activities
we did it... I nearly got sacked, but I was threatened with a sack if it didn't work. That's the other great thing with small companies, isn't it? It's much more real. We spent we didn't have much marketing budget, but I persuaded the board that we should increase the marketing budget, and then we spent all of it on one thing, which is we sponsored a series of outdoor concerts, which was called Music on a Summer Evening, and they were at places like Kenwood House, Kew Gardens, those sort of places, and we became the official sponsor. It was previously sponsored by Waitrose for many years, and we took over the sponsorship, which was a big ticket for us. We invited all our trade customers there. We gave it so much love. All the team were there pretty much, every night. It was a series of about 20 concerts, but we were all there. It became almost our place to meet customers, and we would basically go, we'd have Green & Black's team and ambassadors mixing with the crowds and doing chocolate tasting, but doing it more like wine tasting, but on scale. We're super generous, and then at the end of the evening, we'd give people the most brilliant goodie bag to go home with. So the cost per sample was epic, kind of off the charts, and each event maybe had 4,000 or 5,000 people. But the quality of contact, we went from a brand that wasn't on their radar to being really noticed.
Meek fans versus diehard fans, that's what I'd say.
And we did know that a lot of the customers, or a lot of the people that were going to those concerts, we kind of knew where they shopped as well, and they did massively over-index on some of our perhaps more premium early stage grocery customers. So we'd worked out who we were targeting, not just the eco set, but we were doing quite well with the foodies, but how do we get the next tranche of foodies? They happen to be a bit older, this empty nester profile. How do we sponsor the flower shows? How do we sponsor music concerts? How do we sample at those places? We advertised in the Sunday sups, things like the Telegraph magazine and You magazine with the Mail on Sunday, and we did a cover mount, put a bar of chocolate on the front of Good Housekeeping magazine and things like that.
Did that get you? Was there another set of customers after that?
Not as deliberate as that, because I think that's quite a big broad church, and then it just spreads out really.
Seth, I've literally just read this book.
So no, I'd say that was actually and this is at the stage where we're doing 6 million and trying to get to 10, and then we kept going. But I think it was. We didn't do any further. The biggest strategic shift on the targeting was to just realise that people bought chocolate because of the indulgence and the taste, not just because of its organic credentials. And then when we started to just sort of say, well, who's the next likely tier of customers, we pinpointed the marketing to that group, did it very, very consistently for 4 or 5 years. It was a big commitment for us, but we kept doing it, and we became a very meaningful brand to that segment. And I think people then sort of migrate and find the brand and discover it, and those customers probably recommend it to others. So we didn't ever really do a big reset after that to say, now we need to go for...
Yeah. Seth talks about it as scaffolding. It's like your idea to go from early adopter to mainstream needs some form of scaffolding. You're almost like, say you're building a house, you have things that you're going to put on to help build it. And I suppose with the scaffolding you've put round, you've used the shopper insights and said, right, well, where the Kenwood is scaffolding.
Absolutely.
The over-investing in the goodie bag is scaffolding. The You magazine chocolate sample is scaffolding. And I think, because I've always wondered, and it's like, because it's a bit of a, not a paradox, but it's a bit of a contradiction, because a brand has to be really, like, when you start out, be a bit sharp arrows is what I like to say. It's like, we're just for you.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
Just for you, and it's like, there's no one else. You're going to be our diehard fans, you're going to be our first 1,000 true fans. But then at some point, that arrow almost needs to go, be a little bit blunter and open the net slightly more, which is basically what you've done with that.
It does, but remember that, I think I used the word, narrow and deep is my kind of favourite marketing phrase. Work out who you're targeting and be meaningful to them.
What were some of the other options that were on the table which you were discussing with the board before going with the Kenwood? Like, because as I said, like, you put your neck on the line, mate. Can you remember, like, what were some of the other? Because I think how you select where you go narrow and deep is also a fascinating.
Well, one of the other, look, we ended up like a lot of small companies. You end up kind of doing a few things because you can't stop yourself from. But I suppose it was a tension between should we spend more on new product development and innovation, or should we invest more in marketing? And we did it. We managed to do both in the end, because we've managed to work in a way that we could do innovation and NPD in a very low cost, lean way, because we had lots of very talented food people in and around us. So at the same time, we were on our original range, which was really big 100-gram bars of green and blacks. We were starting to go, well, how do we now that we've got fans there, how do we increase the number of times they buy the brand? How do we get into new occasions? So we did little mini bars and we put them in a box so it became more giftable. And we started to do a few things that would appear in the extra fixtures that emerge around seasonal times, Easter and Christmas, and so we stretched the brand in that way. But the bigger choices were, if I go back in time, do we invest in marketing, telling people about the brand and being clear who we're targeting, or do we keep hiring more people? Do we put a field sales team on the ground? In that business, we chose not to put a field sales team on the ground, but to go more for the.
And then with some of your other businesses, talk me through those other marketing.
Well, Cawston's been different. So Cawston, I think similar philosophy, good quality ingredients, huge addressable market, way bigger than dark chocolate. Dark chocolate is a niche in the very big confectionery market, but when you're into fruit juice and cans of fizzy pop, you're a mega market. So you're very happy if you get a 1% market share. Yeah. So it's still a big number. But as I say, I think how do you getting distribution on soft drinks is more complex, because the market's bigger because there's more places you can sell the drinks to. But surprise, surprise, there's more people wanting to sell their drinks, and there are more complex supply chains and routes to market. So there's way more than half of our sales on the sparkling drinks in Cawston, for example, are outside of supermarkets. But to get our drinks to all these amazing places and different diversity of channels, we have a big network of partners that we work with, wholesaler partners, and they might be an expert in a regional area, or they might be an expert in a type of channel, like people like Cress and Cotswold Fair, who are really, really strong on getting to farm shops and good quality delis and specialty stores. So you have this, much bigger sales task, really. And this business here has a way bigger sales team than we ever had it.
What was the size difference?
Well, total headcount for the company, total number of people that work in, Cawston has about 30 people. I think Green and Blacks had about 25, at the time when we were sort of running it, and it was around 25 million turnover business. But, half of the team here at Cawston are sales people, where it's probably about a quarter or a third of the team at Green and Blacks. And that's because Green and Blacks was more concentrated into the grocery business. So when we come back to our gross margin point, Green and Blacks was actually simpler to run, because more of the products were sold through the grocery channels. Yep. So you need less people, but then you need to support the brand more, because if you don't achieve good rates of sale, then you're not making an impact on the category. So if we could get the rate of sale up, we were already well liked because we were trading people up, more expensive price points through better quality chocolate. We were good from an image point of view, because we were able to say to the retailers, by supporting and having a good offering of Green and Blacks, you're creating a good halo around sustainability and ethical. So there's plenty of reasons to stock Green and Blacks, but kind of needs to land the numbers as well alongside it. And that was about marketing support and promotions, tastings, and making their customers aware outside of the store of the brand. And we didn't do big, we never did TV advertising, but we did back in those days, we did quite a lot of, we did an awful lot of sampling, and we did do a lot with the foodie press. Magazines at that time were still, much more prevalent than they are today. So we were a regular advertiser, and we had all sorts of partnership programs with key food magazines.
And then, but with Cawston, the approach was just to get into distribution?
It's been more about that. It's been hopefully development of great drinks, and we've still placed a lot of importance on hopefully making the brands look attractive. So we've absolutely invested in design. We've probably done more product development and formats on Cawston. So Cawston started out as a range of big cartons of pressed apple juice. We then started to introduce more flavours, all of which were blended with apple juice. Then we did a range in little cartons that were targeting consumption for kids, whether they're going to a casual dining restaurant like Pizza Express, or whether they're packing it in their lunchbox or for a picnic. So we took pressed juice, put it in a carton, added some water to get the total sugar levels down and make it a really healthy hydration drink for kids and families. And then we moved into the cans, which was about 10 years ago now. And that was about, let's add sparkles to the juice, but still do a very high juice drink. And that's much more into sort of on-the-go refreshments.
Did this sort of step change the brand, the business?
It really did, yeah, it did.
It's mad, because that's what I was saying with what Giles was telling me about how format innovation is not like this is wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. But it's like, it sounds too good to be true, because it is quite complicated. But it's like just moving into different formats.
Well, if you can do it, you have to have a thread running through the brand. As is, we say it's always made with pressed fruit, and we say no jiggery pokery, which is our kind of way of saying that we don't do shortcuts and use cheap ingredients and fake messages around claims and things like that. So there's an honesty to it. So that's the kind of red threads for the brand that are not for negotiation, and that will appear on all of the portfolio and the range. But they're different, slightly different consumer target audiences, different usage occasions, different moments, and opens up opportunities in different channels. The great thing with moving into the cans 10 years ago, it gave the brand much more visibility, because suddenly we were in coffee shops and sandwich places, and you'd see people drinking the cans out and about, whereas previously we were an in-home brand with the 1 litres.
I was listening to a podcast, Rory Sutherland was on it with Jamie Lang, and they're talking about why Guinness had this sort of roaring success. And obviously he's like into sort of evolution and links marketing to evolution, but he was saying one of the successes of Guinness, for example, is that when you go to like social proof and mimetics, like we copy what other people do. When people go to a pub, right, after this, and everyone's having a Guinness, you're like, oh, fuck me, I know it's Guinness, it's black and it's white, it's clear. Those 10 people having Guinness, oh, I'll have a Guinness. Cider, you don't know what cider is. Cider could be a pub. Absolutely. That's why he said cider categories always struggled. And I suppose this does kind of link to you. If you've got a family of 5 in Hyde Park, and like loads of the kids are drinking these, then there's that whole sort of mimetics and kind of our evolutionary desire to do what other people are doing. And I think he said that, I was like, that's genius, but it does apply to this.
Well, I think if the marketing sort of theory, they talk about mental availability for a brand. Is it out there and visible, and can people do people see it really? That's not just advertising, that's the physical availability of a brand. And the other step that was definitely good for Cawston was when we did the children's drinks, because all of a sudden we've been with Pizza Express for many years now, but we're their chosen drink on the kids' menus. But we're now in Wagamama, we're in Bill's, and we're in lots of great pub groups. And that is an occasion where the kids aren't there on their own, they're with the family, they're on the menu, suddenly the little cartons on the tables. The proposition works for those channels because it's a cleaner drink, and if you're running a casual dining restaurant targeting families, you want to be the same way that you take great pride in your food, you want to be offering families a good ingredients, clean label choice on drinks. So all of a sudden that's a massive step change on brand awareness by having a different format versus the previous one, which was really, I guess, where Cawston started. It was 1 litres of pressed juice that were purchased usually from supermarkets, and then would go straight into the fridge and be used at breakfast time at home. And that's still a valued and much loved part of our business, but it's not very visible areas. And actually the number of units we sell so many more units of the kids drinks than the sparkling drinks, because they're smaller format and they're more frequent versus the sort of big home serve size that we have for the juices. But hopefully if people see different parts of the range, they sort of join them together.
And like, brand ecosystem and having that's like your hero product, right? Like it's the.
I think it's become that. When we launched it, it was a bit of a punt. To be honest, we certainly didn't do any research. We didn't look at the size of the rhubarb market because there wasn't one.
I was speaking to Steve about this. The BP Garage.
Yes,
they've got the coldest fridges in the world, and like honestly, on a summer's day, I'll like go further to go to a BP Garage and get one of those when it's like it's dripping, it's so cold.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god.
Yeah, no,
it's glorious.
A can of good pop in a proper fridge is good. At the right moment.
I think that's such an interesting marketing strategy from them of just make the fridges incredibly cold.
Yeah,
I don't know why they've done it. I'm sure there's something in that,
but I think it's what we've just talked about though, about how do you put a brand on the map and grow a brand. I think of all of that as marketing, whereas I think often we're too quick to sort of think of marketing as the advertising or it's the activation kind of plans. But marketing is just about how do you get your brand out there and doing it. So product development can be I think you have to be aware. I mean, product development. Look, you can keep going. You can develop the 75th flavor of something, and it's just very small returns. But if you can do smart adjacent product development that is true to your brand, but just unlocks new customer groups, or
fucked up on format innovation, or have you?
Well, it's about. Is it a big fuck up? It was a restriction really, and I'd say that when we launched the cans in a multi-pack format, due to some supply chain constraints, we worked so hard to get what hopefully is a beautiful can. Still like it today, 10 years on. But the multi-pack solution that we had, which was 4 cans, for lots of kind of supply chain restriction reasons, we've been unable to present that in a smart card outer for many years, just due to constraints around packing lines, etc., at a cost that's acceptable. And therefore, on shelf, I think that format should have been a much bigger product for us than it's been so far. Still, it does okay, but we're really proud of the drink that's inside, but we're not very proud of how it presents on the shelf because it's in a sort of shrink wrap that's not printed brilliantly. It's sometimes misaligned. So it's a very functional piece of packaging, but it's not beautiful. It's not crafted. It doesn't feel very Cawston.
How are you going to try and solve that, or is it?
Well, we're finally. In fact, there's one over there. We're finally moving now to.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
so we're relaunching the multi-packs next month, and they will finally have a much smarter card sleeve, more like you see in craft beer, that type of present, which is a significant on cost, and we've had to work and rearrange all of our some of our manufacturing partnerships and there's been some investment attached to that in order to be able to do this pack. But I think that, again, will mean that the image of the brand in stores where those multi-packs are will step change. And I think that will be the most important marketing investment we make this year. In fact, to pay for some of that, we're having to do less advertising. I love the
way your brain works in terms of how you think about this marketing and mental availability. It's like almost like your cogs are your marketing, your innovation and your pack format is your marketing. Like, it's just... If you're a challenger brand that's absolutely killing it in D2C, but you're struggling to crack retail, then you've got to listen to this. Maybe you've got an Ocado listing, maybe you've got a Whole Foods listing, maybe you're absolutely killing it in Selfridges, maybe you're absolutely killing it in your farm shop and your indies. But my friends, making the leap, crossing El Chasm, crossing El Rubicon to grocery retail is not easy. It's the Champions League of FMCG. It's super hard. It means playing at a higher level, and that's where so many amazing brands sadly stumble. Look, retailers want stories backed by data, not dreams, and a pretty pitch deck. And let's be real, supermarkets are not just going to magically make a space for you and your little brand. They need data. Something's got to go for you to get in, for you to get on shelf. And that is why I've got to tell you about North Star. They are the team that's helping purpose-led FMCG brands go from gut instinct dreams to unstoppable pitch decks that actually unlock retailers. North Star are not like another data company that force feed you data like foie gras, that act like a NASA space mission. It's super simple to use. Their team are amazing and they actually get the challenger mindset. North Star are your shortcut to smarter decisions, stronger pitches, and investor confidence, all built specifically for challenger brands like yours. You don't need a massive sales team, you need North Star. Link in the show notes. Click that link and you'll be able to book a free demo with North Star. Highly recommend that, and thank me later.
So we were talking about different almost different choices about where to invest in order to get a brand working, rather than just thinking traditional marketing or.
Yeah, it's almost seeing the way you view things, which is just so unique. Is the cogs are the marketing, the innovation is the marketing. Like
I think I'm a big believer in that, and as I say, I was fortunate enough to work at Pret as the marketing director there for several years, and that was, that's probably the greatest case study there. Really. Pret doesn't do any. Does a few things now around loyalty programs, etc. But it never doesn't do any advertising. But what's the biggest marketing investment for Pret? It's actually securing the best sites that have beautiful visibility, good fascias. So their marketing spend's actually the rent bill, because they're getting more places, and that's opening up their mental availability and distribution. And then they choose to make a lower gross margin on their food than most of their competitors, because again, they invest in the quality of the ingredients and they invest in freshness, and there's more labour costs involved in making food throughout the day in every shop rather than making it all in a central factory. They're all choices and decisions. They can't do all of that and go and do TV advertising because there's not enough slack in the P&L to do it all, but that business has chosen to do certain things and really commit to them, because maybe one way of thinking about it is, rather than thinking is it marketing or is it sales, or what, thinking about if you wrote the word marketing investments on a piece of paper and then put a big red line through it and just said, things customers see or feel, so swap marketing and write customers, and then say what's this investment going to do for the impression of our brand for this customer? Will it matter to them more? So at Pret, one of the other great investments that I did all of these great investments before I worked there, by the way. They were it was a joy working there, because there wasn't much to build. It was
can be like Arnie Slot, mate. Just let Klopp build the Ferrari, and then you just get the keys and jump in.
So Klopp and Shankly and everybody else that had gone undoubtedly had built Pret long before I rocked up. My job was to sort of help them kind of expand it and not fuck it out of the guys. keep the brand special. But as someone said, like any idiot at the time could have run Pret, but it was a gift of a role. But how do you kind of keep the philosophy going? And just because you get bigger, just because you get bigger doesn't mean you can afford to do TV advertising. It doesn't mean you should do it. So that idea of just get bigger, therefore you do what all the big guys do, is a massive fail. But I remember another investment that they made was, which I look back, I think is one of the greatest investments. So most of Pret stores were most of them were in London, but they were in city centre, targeting office workers or busy transport hub type customers. That was the profile. So what's the thing that matters most to people? People want nice food and drink, but what you're really selling is time, because they were in a hurry. So speed of service was the most important thing. So installing more tills. And then at the time when Transport for London started to introduce Oyster cards, and therefore the whole thing around contactless payment, again, this is 10 years ago, whatever, became a thing. And Pret just rolled out contactless in breakneck speed across all of its shops, and it just sped up the speed of service massively, because people could pay faster than they used to have to do when they used to have to sign the docket and everything else. That's an IT investment. You couldn't get any more kind of away from marketing.
So everything is marketing in some respects.
Everything is marketing.
Yeah.
So, the first thing to do is to say, well, you're doing some of these things anyway. How do you just make sure that those initiatives
What are other businesses I'm trying to think of other businesses where that's the case, where everything is marketing, or they've thought of things sort of differently.
Let's think about that. We'll come back. I'll come back to something. I think there are a lot.
There's always it's just the little touch points you're not thinking.
Well,
for example, I went to cricket last week, which is there's this wonderful Indian restaurant. Will's been on the podcast. They've just opened a new one in Shoreditch. We're potentially doing an event there.
Right.
And so we sort of had some lunch and went round, and then I took one of our clients there, and never seen this with a new restaurant. And he, at the next day with the meal, I get a personalised email from a guy called Adam, and I'm thinking, oh fucking hell, who's this? And it just says, we thank you so much, and it's like, hey Dan, and this is all done because basically at cricket you can only pay. In this Shoreditch site, you have to put your details down, so it all links. But it's a moment of magic at the end. So you pay for it, and you can only pay. You can't do card. And it goes, "Hey Dan, we know, kind of like links to this, times are tight or something like this.
Yeah.
There's a plethora and an ocean of amazing restaurants in London. We are so hugely grateful that you've come with us. And next time, click this link. Again, it's almost like IT, and make sure you book it through this link to book again. I think there's like a little discount code.
Yes, yeah.
But then it's signed like, have an amazing day, Adam. Obviously, the whole thing's automated, but it links to like, I hasn't happened to me in a restaurant in London. It's usually like, it comes from like Trustpilot, like rate it out of 5. So personalised, probably took 10 minutes to write.
Yeah.
The knock-on effect's wild, i.e. I'm talking about it with you on a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the whole peak-end rule thing, which is like your Daniel Kahneman's, which is your perception of an experience is how things end, not the beginning. It's why Oasis leave their best song till the end. And I was like, that is like, again, it's not a product thing, it's not social media.
No, it's customer experience though, isn't it? And joining everything up. So
that's it, joining everything up.
Joining things up is hard, because actually most things are developed in silos, so there's someone that sends out
what's the art to joining things up?
Well, I think it is around having an all-seeing eye on the brand. It could be the marketing director, it could be a creative person, but ideally it's a group of people who all worry about stuff and, you know, are just automatically wired to be thinking that way. So you need people that believe in the brand and are, you know, worried about every aspect of the experience and how it all connects. It's easier in small companies really, because less people to actually, there's less departments running off in different directions because you don't have as many people. Really difficult in bigger companies because it's all siloed. Everyone's got separate objectives. Someone's charged with making the business more digital. Someone's charged with doing lots of innovation. Someone's charged with improving the gross margin. They all are kind of fighting for their kind of objectives to make sure they get their bonus every year. And meanwhile, the customer's often completely forgotten. You know, it just doesn't get curated or knitted together.
Because as Pret, like, what's your opinion on Pret now? How they're doing things? Because it's not, Julian's no longer involved, is he? Or is... No,
he's not a shareholder anymore, or hasn't been since I think 2017 or something like that. I mean, many of the senior team there have been there for a number of years, so they had good continuity. Obviously, the pandemic was about. I mean, of all the businesses that were hit, Pret was very badly hit because it was a very office worker type concept. So that was, you know, extremely tough. I think they make great efforts to sort of try and be a more digital native kind of brand. So they've pushed the coffee and they've pushed the loyalty programs to get people back through the doors. And I think that was successful. But my impression is it caused, you know, it wasn't as joined up as it might have been, and perhaps the customer experience suffered a little. So, or if you were not the person that had signed up for the coffee subscription, was the experience, you almost felt like a sort of second-class citizen if you just wanted to go in and buy a sandwich as you did before, because the queue was suddenly 3 times longer and everyone's waiting for their, you know, caramel latte with extra customization on the loyalty program. So all of a sudden it became a bit tense. I think it was more difficult for the team members. So the very slick brand delivery suffered a bit. But being back in London the last couple of weeks, I mean, I'll always be a Pret customer, and
tuna sarnie is just a thing of beauty. I can eat that.
there's many things of beauty at it,
the croissant with the ham and the cheese.
Yeah,
the little breakfast thing. That's just
only available until 11 o'clock. But no, it's very. I feel they've, you know, I think they've course corrected again. I think they've learned from some of those, you know, experiments and tests, and I think I've been impressed with it this week. I think it's been good.
Tell me about, so you're now based in Melbourne.
Yes.
You're working for Nandos in Oz.
Yeah, I'm an advisor advisor non-exec to Nandos for their Australia and New Zealand business.
So they've got Nandos in UK, South Africa.
Well, Nandos started in South Africa originally. Yeah. That's where the concept started.
What year was that? Roughly,
that's very good. 40 years ago.
40 years
Yeah,
ago?
that kind of time period, I believe.
Wow. Yeah, what? So 1980s, there was Nando's thinking about.
Yeah.
That's
so it started in South Africa. The largest market for Nando's is the UK today.
Yeah.
But Nando's is also in America. And it's been in Australia and New Zealand for many years. But there's now about 160 restaurants in Australia and New Zealand. So I work...
How many's in the UK? Like
UK's, I think, about 500 now, that kind of level. 400 or 500, yeah.
The head office is in Putney, isn't it?
Head office is, so the UK office is in Putney.
Yeah, because I always think that Putney Nando's is the best Nando's.
Well, that's my first, I used to live literally, my first flat in London was around the corner from the Nando's office, and and one of their very, very early Nando's restaurants on the Upper Richmond Road in East Putney.
Yeah.
So one of the first meeting I went to when I flew back last week was to go to a Nando's kind of board meeting that was in Putney. It was great. It was like coming back home. I mean, I'm a newbie in terms of involvement with Nando's, but it's kind of great going back to Putney. But I do remember trying it, 25 years ago when I first moved to London. I remember going to the Putney restaurant.
Yeah.
So
that is the best one. Like, I've got like a thing about how crispy I need my chicken, but the one in Wimbledon's is just not. They just don't get the crispiness right. So I always think, because the head office is above, I always say to my mate, like, we've got to go to the one in Putney. But yeah, so talk me through Nando's and how they do marketing in the UK first, and then what's the supple nuance in Oz? Because I think we've said it's not a like for like at all.
Well, food's very similar, branding's very similar, but yeah, the sort of size of the restaurants and the way people use them is slightly a bit more off-premise in Australia, whereas in the UK it's more dine-in as a concept. So the restaurants some of the restaurants in Australia, just for legacy reasons, are kind of much more, they're smaller sites, less seating. But as the business evolves, it's more focus on restaurants that would be closer to the style that you're used to seeing in the UK. I mean, I feel like Nando's fits my philosophy. It's rather like Pret in that, I mean, they do some advertising now, but that's only been a very recent thing for Nando's. The entire development of Nando's has been about, obsessiveness around customer experience, the food, the design.
Why don't they, so I've always wondered this, what's the whole thinking of you getting a knife and fork and your sauces, and, because there's no servers, is that like a...
Well, there is the food is delivered to you, but you're part of serving yourself, aren't you? And
what's the genius behind that? Has that ever been unpacked?
Well, I think that often in a restaurant, someone sits you down, gives you the menu, then you wait for them to come back to take the order. It's kind of quite a few pain points and frustration, and people are quite happy. Many customers now they can order with a team member or a Nandocker, as they're called at Nando's, or you just do it on the QR code, which more and more people are doing. Then there's a bit of a wait for your food, and it depends who you're with, of course, but often you're with family and friends, and you have plenty of time to chat to them. So it's a bit of sort of wasted time period until your food arrives. So actually, to go up and help yourself to the sauces and help yourself to a bottomless kind of fizzy drink or whatever is sort of something to do, and it kind of
I've always tried to sort of work out the genius of it. Because I also think there's an element of personalisation. So this is, I think, in any sort of marketing or business, personalisation is like... Because I know I'm going to go for that Vesuva sauce.
Well, they want you to feel comfortable and feel... I mean, sometimes in a restaurant people feel quite awkward. They want you to feel comfortable and empowered, and you're able to go and choose your soft drink, and you can... there's a sense of generosity and hospitality in the way that it's laid out. And yes, you're part of serving yourself, so you almost, I guess you could argue, you're paying for your own labour costs to do some of those things, but you're enjoying doing that, and you're
personalisation.
You personalise it, yeah. So you're more in control than you are in a restaurant where you just feel like I'm 100% in the hands of the server, and I have to wait here and I can't move until they come. So it's just make yourself at home and experience. So they've always been big on that, and a personalisation obviously goes right through the menu, from how the basting that you choose and how spicy you like your chicken to be. And they've done some terrific menu development that, on the salad side, and they sell lots of this amazing broccoli, and there's more. It's not just chips are fantastic, but it's not just. So there's
peri salt on those.
I think there's kind of much more variety than you might expect to get in some of the more convenient faster food places. It's a restaurant.
I also think
personalisation.
The genius is when they put the taps in.
Yes.
I don't know when they did that, but again, that links to the pecan rule. It's like because you're walking out of Nando's, or like you go to like some restaurants you eat with finger food. It's like, for fuck's sake, like it's all in your hands, and you get in your car and it's all over the leather or whatever. It's like they can wash your hands with soap. I'm like, that is.
But they are
absolute genius.
But the founders of Nando's are still shareholders and involved in the business, but they've got a long-term kind of senior team. Obviously, there's been some more recent joiners, but there's a real deep understanding of what makes that brand, tick, and they just worry about the details, and they join it all up beautifully well.
How do they all join it all up?
Well, I think they don't sit in an office. I mean, they're out in the restaurants a lot of the time, so they're a very humble, grounded team that are not like big flash execs. A lot of them have grown up through the restaurants, and they spend a lot of time on the shop floor almost, and they're close to the detail. And but But all good businesses are like that. I mean, you're in trouble when you've got people sitting in an office that forget what happens at the sharp line. You know, it's all about, they say it's all about the people that make the chicken. They're the people that matter at Nando. So how are the team members being looked after, supported?
Well, isn't it? Ultimately.
I mean, they don't even call it head office. I think it's restaurant support or something like that is the description. But it's almost like we shouldn't have one of those. It only exists to help the people on the front line deliver the brand. And that's the mentality there.
That's the same as Gales. I was speaking to Anne.
Pret was the same. Then. Pret is the same. And lots of businesses are the same. And lots of people like to say they do that. But I think they worry about, and they worry about some of the, I've been really impressed with some of the things like the playlists and the music there and the lighting, right, and the sound of the music. Obsessed about stuff like that.
Really?
Now, so they're not just, and that's not left to restaurant managers for, individual choice. It's carefully curated. It's done with some brilliant South African kind of artists and get the soundtracks. So there's a sound to Nando's as well as.
Yeah, oh God, they're really.
So all these touch points are very, very carefully considered, and how they sort of coexist and work as a system really matters. And it's not done on a workshop somewhere. It's done by putting things into the restaurants and working it out. And they don't get it right first time all the time, but they are obsessive about the details.
Yes.
And trying to keep it.
What other principles would you say from your experience with Nando's that are sort of instrumental to their success, other than being in the trenches, being in the details?
Well, I think the offer itself, the offering is very clear. So, having flame grilled peri-peri chicken as a signature kind of dish that they're famous for, the ability to customize that, but then to develop the range and the choices around that. Some things very indulgent, some things healthier. I think the personalization aspect that you talk about's really important. But and they've got very iconic design. So
as in the
artwork style, whether it's the seating and the cushions or the effort, they spend way more money than you see. A lot of these brands as they roll out, it's a bit cookie cutter. I mean, they do the opposite to that. So every restaurant's designed individually. Gales is really similar.
Yeah.
So, but you've got somebody or a team of people owning and running that business, I would say, for whom those things, they get excited by that. So they think of each restaurant as its own business, own team. Don't just say that's a model, 2.5, roll out another 50 of those. They're building it from the inside out and from the bottom up, and they do it. They're fortunate that they're able to invest significant amounts because the business allows that now, but they really worry about the details.
What are so what are sort of the marketing challenges you're facing in Australia right now with them?
Well, I think the casual dining type experience in Australia is not as well developed as it is here. So if you think about anybody that's grown up in the UK in the last 20, 25 years, we've had Pizza Express and we've had a Nando's and a Wagamama. The idea of those kind of places, not fast food, but casual, they are restaurants, but they are, they're multi-site restaurants and they've got a clear concept. But in Australia, you certainly have all the QSR, as they call them, the fast food guys. So McDonald's is there. It's called Macca's by the locals. KFC's there. It looks exactly the same. All of the.
Got any native sort of.
Well, they have. They have. So they have Hungry Jack's is the Australian name for Burger King. And
really? It's not called Burger King?
It's the only place in the world where Burger King is not Burger King, it's Hungry Jack's. Because I used to work for Burger King when I used to go, but I don't know the full backstory, but there was a guy that had the whole franchise for Australia, took on Burger King. So he took on all of the system benefits, the Whopper and the graphics and everything else, but did some kind of deal that just said, I think he was the original founder of Hungry Jack. So he wanted all the benefits.
Does it look like?
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, it look like Burger King or something?
Yeah, it's got the same colorways. In fact, it's got the same colorways that you remember. So it's got the colorways that Burger King used to have and now has again in the UK. Remember there was a phase when Burger King went blue?
Yeah. Do
you remember that? Blue and red? Yeah. It's a bit like Pepsi, Coke, Burger King, McDonald's, but Burger King was always the original Burger King was always the orangey colours.
Yeah.
And the flames and everything else, and then with a black background.
What was the pun here, but what was the beef with McDonald's like when you're at Burger King? Was it like
guerrilla warfare?
Really?
Yeah, no, it's good. Flame grilling just tastes better, as we always said. No, it's pretty intense.
Really? Yeah.
It's pretty intense. Yeah, but I mean, they had, they're they're a bigger business and their executions.
But it is mad how
Excellent.
well it's like. So the Pepsi Cola beef is real, and it's like I find it crazy about how these.
But Burger King used to do these. I mean, I think at their best, they used to do these adverts that were. And they do, you know, when two tribes go to war, big soundtrack, flames versus versus Ronald, and they've got back to that in recent years. So I think when they're a bit fiery, customers quite like it. So a bit of that competition is quite healthy, and playing out in public and having a bit of a, you know, good competitive spirit between the two.
Rivalry, isn't it, in brands?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, McDonald's is a bit more family cutesy, isn't it? Happy Meals and Disney, and Burger King's a bit grungier, young adults.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, the Australian franchisee guy, I don't know him or his name, but when he did the original deal, was adamant that he kind of would pay the franchise fee or whatever, but he'd still call it Hungry Jack's, and somehow he got that agreed. So today, there isn't Burger King, there's Hungry Jack's.
Okay.
But if you kind of blinked, you go, it looks the same and it tastes the same, and he still has to follow all of the rules, but it's called Hungry Jack's. And it's a local, you know, it's treasured by the locals. That's all it's ever been known as. So you've got that. So you've got that set.
Yeah.
And then you've got the big difference, you know, local nuance and culture. So in suburban Australia, people, I mean, they do have pubs. They call them hotels, but they don't have as many pubs as we do.
They call pubs hotels.
Yeah. So you think you're going, you know, you think all I want to do is go for a pint. I don't want to go to a hotel, but they're all called the hotel. So
that's crazy.
So you'll have the, you know, the Blackrock Hotel and the Chelsea Hotel and the whatever, all of these, all named after the districts and suburbs where they are. Some of them are named like our pubs, funkier names of animals or history or whatever, but most of them have the word hotel.
Our names of pubs are so good.
Yeah.
You
can't.
And our tube map.
You can't.
Names of our tube destinations.
Yeah. Tube map and pubs
That's like the best. That's basically the best marketing of all time, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Brilliant design, brilliant. It's iconic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in Australia though, you have. So the pub culture's less. So people go out less in the evenings. They eat at home more in the evenings.
On Sunday, isn't Sunday a massive?
Well, the biggest difference. I mean, look, I'm a relative newbie there. I've been there 2.5 years now. But breakfast and brunch is like a massive thing. Whether you're having a business meeting or you're meeting your family or friends, or going for breakfast and going for coffee is just how the whole place runs. So you have these coffee shops that all of whom, the vast majority, do really good food as well. They do a through the day sort of brunch menu. They shut up shop at 3:00 in the afternoon in most of these places, so they're open early 3 till 3. And then you're left with your local Chinese restaurant or your fish and chip shop or your Italian local hero restaurants. Oh, loads of fish and chips, yeah.
Really?
Well, we've got waves and surf and
fish and chips. You don't get that bit. I just thought
good craft beer.
It was more shrimp on the Barbie vibe, but maybe not. Yeah.
Well, have that as well. That as well. But actually, eating at home and entertaining at home is a bigger thing in Australian culture. So you have people over more often. They bring their own drinks. It's just some more casual, more informal. It doesn't always involve the barbecue, but it does quite a lot. And then people, a big priority for people is if they've got. They kind of save up so they can improve their kitchen, indoor, outdoor area, and they'll prioritise a nice barbecue and that type of lifestyle. It's a big thing. So they go out less often. But it means the casual dining format, shall we say, or experience is less well developed there. So the challenge Nando's has is where does it fit in what's it for and when do I go there? And so the people connect really, really well with the food and the vibe of the brand. But we've got some work to do, I think, just to give it a role in people's repertoire and people's lives, and what are the occasions and when is it for are not as obvious to Australian customers. And some of the early Nandos that opened in Australia, as I said before, were smaller format stores with more of a takeaway propensity, and they do very, very well, and they're an important part of the future. But you could say they send a slight mixed message to customers. Is that a place I go for a takeaway, or is that a place I go to eat out and take my family? Whereas here, Nando's is a place you go to. You go to Nando's, and it's a restaurant, and you know the format, and you enjoy as you say, you enjoy the soft drinks and going back and having free refills, and you enjoy the generous amount of free peri-peri sauce that you can customize and choose. You know how you order. It's a thing going for Nando's. It's an experience. So that same experience is available in Oz, but it's less understood. So the work is to just...
And what are some of the ways you're going to try and make that concept more understood?
Well, I think, just quality of execution. So really getting the delivery of the brand good through strong amounts of training and investing in the team so they can actually deliver that experience well. Investing more in restaurant design so that the restaurants are bigger, they've got more seating, they've got some of the signals that we've talked about, like the free refill drinks and the big sauce kind of stations and all that. So creating a more distinctive experience, building more Nandos that look more like that is all part of it. And then there'll be a job to do on top of that around just introducing that to more people. So advertising might be part of it, but I would say it would be the icing on the cake. Most of the effort really is about doing it, again, bottom up, inside out, invest at the restaurant level. But I'm a bit part advisor on the sidelines there, but it's a privilege to be involved.
Wanted to know, just because I've literally been smashing Nando's since I was 13. I had one on Monday, and it's just like it's interwoven into the tapestry of my sort of being Nando's. So
yeah, and I think for some Australians it is there, but it's not on the scale that it is here yet. But that's the opportunity. It's very exciting to think that we could replicate some of the UK brand affinity and connection and get that working there. It would be a really exciting sort of future for them, I think.
Talk to me, because you're setting up something that's going to link or help, because one of the things I've always thought fascinating is how close Oz is, like, culturally to the UK, but how fucking miles away it is, versus, say, the US. And so many brands look at going to the US as their sort of first point of call.
Yes.
And we've talked over beers and stuff before about, like, how, it's...
In a hotel.
Yeah, I wish. Some booze.
The Dog and Duck Hotel.
Yeah, the Dog and Duck Hotel. Some boozer off Southwark or Suffolk, wherever it is. But and what you were saying to me, mate, is like actually, it could actually be easier for brands to go to Oz because, like, there's only 2 supermarkets. It's like a duopoly. So once you actually get in, like, you're in kind of thing, if it's working. Yeah. But then actually what's the nuance is, like, our banter is very similar.
Much close, I think, much. I mean, I'm married to an Aussie, so I kind of get used to the banter. But I think I feel like it's so much closer than UK, America. And having, again, Green and Blacks and Pret both went into the US. The visual identity of the brand kind of translates really easily, but the sort of tone of voice and
go more into that.
Well, I mean, most of your listeners will probably know Pret as the better example, but Pret's whole marketing style wasn't very brash. It was very beautiful, crazy art on the windows made out of ingredients.
Yeah,
it wasn't very sell. It was much more. It's like a charm offensive with some sort of visual intelligence and humour behind it, and it had a very kind of. So actually, it's a bit Hugh Grant, a bit self-deprecating, but kind of humble. We really hope you think our coffee is great. We think it's really good too, and come and try it. And our ingredients, but it's not a hard sell. So you lift that and you take that brand. There's still a massive demand for good fresh food on the go in Washington DC or New York or Chicago, all places where we were, particularly New York. But the tone of voice of Pret was a bit too subtle, and the locals found it sort of underwhelming at times, in that it wasn't quite sort of. Rather than we've got really good organic coffee, and we'd write the really good in brackets because we didn't want to be too arrogant and too confident. And the Americans would go, you bunch of losers. You need to have really fantastic coffee, not really good. So,
yes.
So the immediacy and the more kind of up and at it. I mean, you see that in some of the not so great shades of American kind of confidence and attitude. But the brashness factor, I think, meant that tone of voice didn't travel as automatically, whereas the Aussies and ourselves are on a very similar page, I think, in terms of both markets appreciate really good design, really good food quality, and quite humorous, low-key
we use the word
marketing
very frequently.
We've all got lots of mates, mate.
Yeah.
And they shorten every word, and we don't, and things like that. But they've got. I think the two are similar, and. The Australian grocery trade is, you're right, there's two major players there, Woolworths and Coles, who between them have, I think, 80% plus market share. So if you can get a brand into the Australian market, you can get into sort of 2,000 plus grocery stores across those two, and you don't need a giant team to do that. What you do need is people that kind of can turn it on and make it happen locally, but you don't need to build a big infrastructure to do it. And yet it's a bit like getting another Tesco or Sainsbury in the UK.
But with this, because this is what I was speaking to Georgie about, who's your business partner, she was over.
Yeah, Georgie Scott.
Yeah, she's brilliant. But she was saying that, you know, we're having a good old chinwag about how, like, and I think people, and I was like saying sort of thing the same as like the UK grocery market is literally the best in the world. And it's like, and like the buyers all go over to Coles. A lot of the buyers, they'll go over to Dubai and stuff like that. And also, we've got from a challenger brand perspective, it's like we're fortunate in the sense that, like, if you don't get into one, you've got another 4 or 5 to knock on the doors of.
True.
But whereas in Oz, it's like you've basically got 2, and they're like there isn't really a Selfridges. There's like this is what Aaron was saying to me. There's not really like this. Like big indie market is there apparently. I don't know. Like it's just what
I think there are some great indies, but it's very fragmented and it's very you need different wholesale partners in different states to do it. So you can do it, but it's a lot more hard yards and it's grassroots type development. So if you want to do something to get scale of distribution at any pace, then the two big retailers or one of the two is an important step probably for a grocery brand to get one of them on board, you know, pretty early in the journey. But you're seeing, I mean, there are other retailers. I mean, Costco's building a good, you know, developing business there. So there's other routes in outside of Coles and Woolworths, but they are, you know, they're pretty dominant. But yeah, George's experience, I mean, she's worked in FMCG all of her life. She's actually worked in the UK. She's an Aussie, but she spent most of her life in Sydney. But she was part of the team that took brands like Oatly and Fever Tree, which were, I guess, not non-Australian brands into the Australian market and helped sort of develop them from a trade point of view and just checking that the right formats, the right marketing messaging. In both of those cases, the brands translated really smoothly. So it's more about trade execution. And both of those brands have gone on to build, you know, successful footprints in Australia. And there's lots of other UK brands. I mean, a brand like the Spice Tailor has done really, really well in Australia. One of the things with Australian grocery, my observations, and as I say, well, different as in, you know, two big chains rather than 5, 6 big chains as you've highlighted. I think there are less manufacturing and supply options for the retailer, so private label isn't as developed as it is here. It's becoming stronger and stronger. But you think of the success that people like Tesco and Sainsbury and Asda have had here has been because there's been amazing kind of UK food and drink manufacturing that has been able to bring innovation to the table and develop all of those, you know, very comprehensive private label ranges. So there's less innovation. But Australia's a really kind of hot scene in terms of cool brands emerging, you know, like in beauty and like brands like Aesop coming through and things like that.
Well, Will Chase said Melbourne's the best place he's ever been to.
It's great, but most of the innovation isn't in the grocery stores. It's in the hotels or the coffee shops or the restaurants or the fashion places or the beauty places. Some beautiful looking brands, really stylish, got a real. So it's a hotbed of innovation there. But when it gets into packaged goods format, FMCG, it's kind of a bit behind here. So there's less. But the big multinationals, most of them have an operation in Australia, but you know it's not the biggest part of their world, so they don't tend to put huge investment into the market. So they're not building these amazing factories and facilities because the market's almost perhaps not big enough to justify that versus doing bigger things in Europe, Asia, or America. So it's an option, but it's not a must-do for some of those multinationals, whereas most of those multinationals are very active in the UK. So as a result of that, you know, the challenger brands scene here, there's just so many more challenger brands because it's easier. There are more options to get a product produced that you can either build your own manufacturing or you can tap into, you know, a third-party supplier to do that. It's not impossible to do that in Australia, but it's like there's less supply-side choices, I would say.
That means if you're a UK brand going over, there's less competition.
I think there is less competition. But then you've got to work through the practicalities of, you know, can you produce your product locally? Because ideally you would do that if you can. I believe that's what they're doing. The guys at Dash, Jack and Alex are doing that. I think they found.
They got a team over there.
They've got a team there. I think so they wanted to do local manufacturing because it was part of their sustainability footprint and everything else. So you can understand the decision to do that. Manufacturing is more expensive in Australia. Labour costs are higher.
Why is that?
Just wages are higher, just economically. So the cost of producing a product in Australia would be higher than here if you looked at it like for like. So whilst you think you're saving money by making locally, the actual cost of making it is higher in most cases.
Yeah.
So that's one thought for a brand. I mean, Little Moons has now gone into Australia. I don't know whether they're making the mochis in Australia or whether they're shipping them from here frozen.
I was going to say, surely is the shipping not extortionate, or is it?
It's expensive, but it's a possible route. It's a possible route, and there's lots of food and drink in Australia that's coming in from outside of Australia, from the sort of Asia Pac region, a lot of it. So you've got to work through. It's working through what's the right. Can the brand translate to the local market? And then, if so, what's the right operating model to run the brand in the Australian market? Do you need your own company there, or can you do it completely through a distributor who's going to manufacture the product, or are you going to ship it over from your existing manufacturing here? How do you price it in the market? Do you launch with both of the big retailers at the same time if you can, or do you work with one first, establish it, then roll it out? So the business we've set up, we've got two businesses, one called Backpacker Ventures, which is about UK challenger brands that want to go to Australia, and it's about sitting on their side of the table. We're not a distributor, we're not a marketing agency, but we will almost kind of join the team and sort of be part of the development of a business plan for the Australian market. And then we've got another side to our consultancy business called Founder and Future, which is about working with founder-led brands or brands that have received investment from private equity firms or bigger trade acquirers that are trying to work out how do you grow the business without losing that sort of founder sizzle, which is, I'd like to think that's my specialist lifetime subject. So
Founder sizzle.
Well, just how do brands scale without losing all that kind of original founder flair? And I've been fortunate I have been a founder, but I'm more of someone that works with founders to help.
Yeah, so talk me through that process, because I like maybe. Talk me through how do brands scale without losing the founder sizzle? Because it's hard. It's hard, and I've just heard so many horror stories of it going wrong, and then I've heard stories of the founder, once it gets sold, the founder's basically out the door. What's your perspective on the founder sizzle?
Well, I think part of the magic of founders is their instinct and intuition, isn't it? And they've got that. They've done something they've created a brand or a business in the first place because they really believe in something and they're passionate about it, and they're on a mission almost. So they can run on instinct a lot of the time. And, hopefully along the journey, they hire some capable people to work alongside them that professionalizes that process and uses data and insights to kind of make even better decisions. But if they leave the building, say the business has been sold or they're no longer required, then there's a massive vacuum sometimes, because they've been the person that's always been the sort of fountain of knowledge that everybody's gone to make a decision. So you can end up quite quickly turning into, you think you're getting all the benefits of being part of a corporate or having more investment, but you lose all the agility of the founder mindset and the founder thinking. So everyone, better quality people on paper joining those businesses, but they're not used to running on instinct. They're used to running on process, and they're used to, things being very, very sort of process oriented rather than just gut feel and judgment. So what we think the opportunity is to try and, help codify almost that founder spirit right down in a way that's useful, like what's the playbook really, and what really matters about a brand, so that the brand can thrive whether the founder's there or not. And sometimes great if the founder could continue in some guise.
How would you do that with, say, Julian or maybe another
Well, I just think you spend time with the founders, but not just the founders, the people in the team, and you just try and work out what is it. You look back over the history of a brand, what's worked, what's not, when's it gone, when's it really clicked and worked, and why was that? Examples of activation or initiatives or decisions that have allowed the business to fly. And then you try and highlight some moments and you go, oh, this is actually where you've kind of broken the brand here. You've gone off course, and here's why.
What ways to break a brand?
Well, I think when you might have a brand that's got a trailblazing spirit, so its whole ethos around MPD and innovation is around bringing new things to the market. Cawston Press rhubarb. And then you go, another team comes and looks at it and they're charged with what's the next flavour or innovation for this brand, and their start point is not kind of what's exciting in the kitchen and what's a food trend, but is more what are the biggest flavours in the market. So why don't we launch an orange or a lemon, because they're big categories. Now, I'm not saying those are bad things, but they're predictable things, and they're also probably what every other branding them
his dog's looking at
are doing. So the person that comes up and says, it's the daring factor and the sort of, the more pioneering spirit to do new things I think is often what gets lost, and brands just become too sensible almost because they've done too much homework, too much research, and they just turn into they morph into being a big company.
And how do you keep the systems that sort of put a ring fence that Sizzle? Because I get what you're saying completely, but it's like that's such.
Well, I think a lot of the good brands put in place. They empower the management team first and foremost, because people running the business need to do this, not keep rehiring the founder every 3 years when it goes wrong. Which it's a Starbucks with Schultz who keeps going back and all the rest of it. So I think maintaining the founder spirit isn't necessarily about retaining the founder, but there are quite smart ways you can put in place kind of advisory boards and things like that are slightly detached. They are detached from the day-to-day running of the business, but they're people who have got a really good grasp, and it might involve the founder and it's giving those people a voice and giving them the chance to contribute, not get in the way of the day-to-day operations.
Is there an example where you've done that?
We did it at Green and Blacks. So when Cadbury bought Green and Blacks, it's fair to say at the time, I think they were very, very nervous, from the CEO down to the guy who was the M&A director that bought the business, that whilst they could bring lots of scale and power to it, they could also really screw it up if they weren't careful, because they kind of knew that their machine was less high touch. It's very good at doing what it did. So they kept the business independent, rather like Coca-Cola kept Innocent independent, and Innocent still is. Green and Blacks was run as a separate business for about 4 years after Cadbury acquired it. Then it moved into the mothership. But during those 4 years, they ran an advisory board that had Craig Sams, who was one of the original founders of Green and Blacks, myself, and William, who you know as well, who was our chairman. We were on that group. The CEO of Green and Blacks, who had been appointed by Cadbury, was there, and the finance director, and then somebody from kind of Cadbury Group. But it was wasn't the board of the company that had full control over everything, but it was a forum to allow people to contribute and hopefully encourage and breed some good behaviours, but also if they saw things that they thought you're really veering off with this, it was a chance to kind of intervene, or at least provide that point of view. And then at the end of the day, the company's owned by the new owners, so someone in the company has to decide whether they were certainly up for hearing that feedback, but are they up for actually acting upon that feedback? That's clearly the new owner's choice or the investor's choice.
Yeah.
But this is a massive challenge for. I mean, you think people that invest in businesses, usually they're investing. There's usually a founder involved at that point. Like someone like Libby at Piper, when they're looking at how do we think this business is really interesting. They usually think this founder's got some special skills as well. So those are the kind of business they want to invest in. But how does that business kind of grow up really and go to the next stage? So there's this whole area of how do you get the best out of. I think getting the best out of the founders is not just doing things like they all used to be done and going back in a nostalgic way. Because businesses need to be future focused, fresh, relevant. Right, it is like how do you optimize that tension between the sort of founder instinct and then the future? Yeah,
because Libby invested in Flatiron, the steak place. I went for lunch with Charlie, who's the founder. And he's a fucking genius. And so he came up with the little ice creams at the end.
Yeah, great.
He was the one who discovered that this Flatiron was this almost underrated or massively undervalued, yet absolutely delicious piece of meat. And then also he was like, well, fuck this, I'm going to call every single, is it abattoir, which is where the fucking cows are? Abattoir, that's it, yeah.
Yep.
And just relentlessly call them, and I'm gonna cut out all the middleman, cut out all the butchers, go straight to the source. And I think for 10, maybe 5-6 years, which now sounds, with all the inflation going on, I think it was a £10 steak.
That's right.
Which is absolute genius. The genius of when you sit down, there was automatically like truffle popcorn and flavoured water. Again, it's all the stuff we've been talking about today, like that experience. But like how you build that without him, how you keep that there without him being there every day is like, I don't know how you do. Like, what would you say? How would you keep? If that's his genius, how do you put it in code?
Well, it's a bit like, in the way that mechanisms like B Corp have been helpful, I think, in that they started to get companies to at least, rather than just think about mathematical decisions, they're thinking about impact decisions when they're putting together business plans or budgets. There's another lens on things. And I think the founder lens is similar. So just how do you just inject that thinking? What would the founder's answer, be to that? What was their original? There's something that they would be dissatisfied with that led them to start the business in the first place. What's the cause they're agitating for? And just checking that there's that counterbalance to the probably very good common sense of the new more professional team, who get ever more sensible, thinking they're doing a good job. And they are doing a good job, but sometimes by getting ever more sensible, they knock all the edges off the brand that made it. So look, this is not easy stuff, but it's about how do you bring not the voice of the past just because you want to kind of keep the founder involved, but how do you bring that sort of... most founders I know they're never happy, really. They're just constantly agitating. There's a new thing that they're... Julian at Itzy, ex-Pret Julian, there's always something. It's just constant. He's not happy if he's not sort of unhappy and trying to fix something and move it forward and improve it and do it differently and do it better. It's that kind of mindset. And I think in corporate life, that doesn't always... I'm not saying people don't have some of those attributes and skills, but those skills are not valued as highly, I don't think. And
I'm just trying to think, maybe that could be like that could be a business model for me.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking that I've done all these interviews, hire me for it. I'm sorry, maybe we should work together, Mark. I'm just thinking about that because I've always thought about, and Perry's always said this to me, is you've got all these. I've always thought, how do I've interviewed so many of these people. I'm just
you do, yeah.
I've always tried to understand their magic. Then I listen back to the episode, then I write notes on it.
But it's the curiosity that you've got, and you want to keep finding out more and more, and you link it up with things you've read and things you've heard from this business or that business, and you're just so curious. That's the skill. That's a big part of a founder. Is
the curiosity,
constant curiosity, constant slight sort of insecurity, and it's not working even when it's working well. Feeling like you're a phone call away from some bad news on, that always
death metalness sort of not death metal. That's what it feels like to me.
Kind of, you've got to have great resilience, determination, but you just. So I think that's exciting because I've worked with some brilliant founders, worked with private equity, worked for some big corporates, seen brands. Not all brands go off the rails when they get investment or get bought. Some of the challenger brands do very, very well under new ownership, but there are.
What are the hero stories?
What are the hero stories of brands that have been?
Fever Tree?
Well, Fever Tree floated. Fever Tree is a bit different. So, Fever Tree, two great founders, very, very clear positioning and purpose for the business. They worked in. Charles worked for gins, didn't he, before, and worked out that rather than launching the 75th brand to be a premium gin, why wouldn't you be the best tonic that all the 75 gins wanted to be partnering with? That was a brilliant bit of. They all wanted to hang out with Fever.
Genius.
And then they got to. In fact, it's a good example. That business is a good example of. So that it's become famous now. If 3/4 of your drink is the mix with the best, you choose the best tonic. But that was an ad line that was created by an agency called Brave back in the day. It was before they were really doing any advertising. But that's a whole expression of that brand that governed all of their initiatives. So that's when I say about getting the creative skills in early. They didn't get that creative agency in because they were doing an ad campaign. Maybe they wanted a couple of ads but they got top talent in early. And out of that came almost a genius line that's lasted forever and gone global.
Yeah.
They, however, they floated, so they've got a different set of pressures now. So they've not got their style's not being cramped by corporate ownership, but there's the pressure of being on the stock market and having to satisfy the city and deal with that, which I would imagine preoccupies most of their time. They're still doing very well, but any variation in their business performance versus what they said at the last update to the city just gets punished severely. You're just constantly under the spotlight. So you have less freedom than you do when you're in private ownership. So I think that model's really, really tough. But you look at, someone like the VC firms like Piper and like Active that have backed many, many brands over time. And there's a series of case studies of success, and Perry's been involved in designing a lot of them. Of brands where, with some investment and some smart help, the original founder idea has really kicked on. Pret's a good example of that. Pret went through a few different ownership stages, but, it was between 2011, I think, and 2017. It was around about those timelines. It was backed by Bridgepoint, a big private equity firm who were fantastic for Pret. They gave it greater resources, intensity. Some super smart people joined our board. And were they the people that were, telling us what to do on the marketing? I mean, they'd have a view, but not really. But they were really good on things like bringing discipline and analytics to the business planning process and choosing better sites and using more data in the business. They brought some smart intelligence that made better decisions.
Like linking left brain, right brain, isn't it? Really
Logic and magic. Found a future wheels. It's just these tension points, and how do you kind of flush them all out? So, because what you're trying to do is not go all sensible and not go all founder crazy. It's just, how do you get this constant? You want positive tension all the time, but if sometimes you can see how businesses end up with a room of people who don't like the tension. They're also sensible that they don't confront the tricky things and it's out of these kind of tensions that the brand magic often comes. So look, that's what we're.
Oh, sorry, mate.
Sorry, that's what we're going to be doing.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, that's good, is like when you got the Green and Blacks exit. Was that what? Talk me through that period. Was that when you first made a good bit of dough? Basically, was Green and Blacks? Was that the?
It was my first time working for. I mean, I had a kind of life working for United Biscuits, and then I worked for Burger King. Then got persuaded by William Kendall to come and join Green and Blacks.
How did you meet William?
I met him through. They decided they wanted a marketing director or head of marketing role.
How old were you?
I was. How old was I? I was like 28 or something like that.
Fucking hell, that's so young.
But I was at Burger King. I had a £22 million marketing budget, and I was part of a big team and a big global brand. And then I met William on a motorway services on a Saturday morning.
Oh, really? Which services?
Somewhere at the
Little Chef or something like that.
It was a bad version of a Little Chef. Yeah. And I was checking out the Burger King because I still work for Burger King there. Actually, we were in one of those sort of dodgy hotels that's next to a motorway service area. It's the only place we could find for a coffee, and just as we sat down for a coffee, there was a wedding reception. We found ourselves in the middle of a wedding reception.
Wow. During
my first meeting with him and first interview. And he owned and run, or been part of one of the owners of Covent Garden Soup Company, and he and his business partner had sold that business, bought into Green and Blacks and Whole Earth. Both companies were together at that time. Whole Earth peanut butters and
So that was part of Green and Blacks.
Yeah, I was marketing director of that for a while. Yeah, and then part of the Green and Blacks journey was actually to divest of Whole Earth and just focus on Green and Blacks. So Fasan, who were until recently were the owners of Whole Earth, bought that. So we sold the Whole Earth brand and used the money from that to put into more marketing for Green and Blacks. That's how we really funded the growth of Green and Blacks and just focused on that. So no, I was kind of headhunted really. Met William, thought he was very interesting, got on very well, and then I said no because I've got a proper job in a big company and this sounds like wild west crazy, and he told me my salary would go down as well, and there was no company car. All the things I felt I'd worked hard for was just like, you don't get any of that. And I think he threatened to buy me a Oyster card or something like that for my public transport travel, because that was a good look for an organic foods company. And anyway, he'd spotted something, I think, in me that was frustrated by the corporate machine.
Which was? Well,
just how slow it was and how nobody made a decision and everybody was sort of incentivized to, I don't know, just not stick their neck out, really. I mean, I think that's one of the big challenges with brand development in corporates is if you really believe in something and you stick your neck out on a new product launch or a new direction for the brand, if it goes really, really well, there's not much in it for you. But if it goes wrong, it's kind of career threatening and you've screwed up your career. So the risk-reward ratio is all wrong.
So that's why basically everyone's too scared to get. They feel like take a risk.
Most of my mates work in. I mean, I've worked for big companies. I'm very positive about big companies, but they are designed to stop you doing stuff rather than to liberate. And there's not enough incentive for risk taking in big companies because they're already successful and they're just concerned about screwing it up. I get it. I
hadn't thought of it from that angle. Yeah,
but you're not encouraged. It's quite career threatening if you go out on a limb and be entrepreneurial and it backfires.
But this is where that's a tension. This is where the founder Sizzle thing could be another little good consultancy business.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a. I mean, look, there's some great big companies, and one of the things that annoys me about the challenger brands world is when everyone's so rude about big companies because some brilliant people in them. They've got great systems, great products. They employ thousands of people, but often they're not very entrepreneurial. That is their. That's why they're quite.
On that one, I've said a few things.
But that's why they're quite fun to take on sometimes, because they're a bit vulnerable in that area. So anyway, cut long story short, then I had a particular trip to the States with Burger King, and to some kind of group conference thing, and it was an exciting trip, but it was just like, oh god, this is so corporate. It was even more corporate when I went to the US, and then by the time I got home, there was another phone call from William saying, have you rethought your... So he basically stalked me for about 3 or 4 months, and then I eventually said yes. So that's the first time I worked for a more entrepreneurial, privately owned business. And I went from 22 million marketing budget to about 20 grand marketing budget, and you're also in charge of the reception and the Christmas party, because that's part of marketing.
Where were you guys based?
We're based in Waterloo, just off the cut, and we made the chocolate in Italy.
Where's the cut?
The cut is by the just by Waterloo Station. Yeah. And it's the road we've met there. It's where the Young Vic Theatre's on.
Okay, yeah.
That runs up between Waterloo up to Southwark Tube.
Oh, by the Ring pub.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was our.
I've actually done a podcast in that Ring pub.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, great history. That it's an old boxing ring.
They had I did.
Many a good green and black strategy decision was taken in the ring.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, we did. Our board room was so small, we obviously accidentally had to spill over to the ring occasionally. Yeah.
So talk me about that exit period. Like how?
Well, that exit was. So I joined, and quite quickly the business wanted to raise money, and it ran a process to do some fundraising, and actually managed to raise money from Cadbury. So they put money. They bought 5% of the business, put some money in, said actually, they thought what we were doing was interesting. They'd try and be a supportive sort of investor in the background, but they were just interested to watch and look at a more, look at a brand that was it was in their category, but it was more dark chocolate, more premium, and it was organic and ethical. Gave them an inside track on a developing niche, really. And they were great as an investor. We had a guy called Mark Reckitt who represented them on the board.
Mark Reckitt?
Reckitt. He was a sort of finance director, M&A kind of guy.
It's quite funny for the name Reckitt, to be in finance.
Well, he's a lovely guy, and I think his favourite day of the month is when he got to come to the Green and Black's board meeting, because it was all so chaotic compared to his normal life, and he could taste the chocolate and have a view and pretend to be a marketing person. So it was good fun for them, but then that led to. Yeah, it did. Eventually, it led to them acquiring the full company in 2005. I think it was. So yeah, that was the first time I got a kind of paycheck, and it was more the recognition, I think, and it helped. My profile kind of was good at Green. I was allowed to sort of represent the brand, and I wasn't the founder of the brand. There was a husband and wife team that had started it originally, but it felt like my baby, and I was able to sort of. Yeah, go and speak at conferences and about it and tell the story of it, and it was a very special time. Then I stayed for another 3 years after that. But
so that's how that.
So that's my founder future kind of thing, because I've lived through the, because I didn't want to leave Grit. So the exit, I got a bit of money. It was good, helped me kind of move from a 1-bed flat to a 2-bed flat type level, and gives you some choices. But it wasn't a life-changing amount of money, but it was. I found it quite a tough time though, because actually some of my peers at Green and Black's kind of gradually left because they wanted to go on and do something else, and I found myself almost feeling ever more like the last remaining sort of voice of the founder in an ever more sensible world. And I'd worked in big companies, so it didn't freak me out. I knew what they were good and bad at, and the brand kept growing. We did really well, and we took it to America and worked with the Cadbury business their group kind of operation in the US to get into places like Whole Foods, and it was quite a nice business that was building there. But then Kraft bought Cadbury, so we went from being a small little separate division of Cadbury to suddenly it all got consumed, and a lot of the Cadbury people
when did Kraft buy Cadbury?
It must have been about 2008, 9, something like that, I think, round about that time. But it was a hostile takeover bid, and all of a sudden, so all of the corporate people we'd been dealing with at Cadbury, who were quite fond of Green and Blacks, but we used to still think they were quite corporate, and we were trying to get them to go a bit more rogue and see things our way. Suddenly they all got a bit marginalised because Kraft came in and consumed Cadbury and then Green and Blacks eventually kind of just became a brand within a portfolio and was no longer run as an independent.
But how did you get that brand ready to exit? Because that's one of the things I've talked about at length is the difference between product market fit and brand exit fit.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you've seen this quite a few times, the brands you're in, it's like...
Well, you need to show good growth. I think that's the first thing. And ideally, you need to show that you can take the brand somewhere, to a segment of the category or the market that the bigger players struggle to go to naturally with their own brands. So Green and Blacks was a niche. It was premium chocolate. It was higher cocoa, dark chocolate, small part of the market. But the brand was like super credible in that space. So do something, around the ankles really, rather than going straight sort of for the... Because why do the big companies don't need to buy a sort of version of themselves really? Sure. They need to invest in things that allow them to travel to new, more future-proof segments, if you like, in a market they understand, but with a brand proposition that has the authenticity and credibility to perhaps stretch to those places in a way that their existing portfolio would struggle to do that. So you need to have a clear proposition. You need to show that there's growth ahead, not just that you've had all the growth. You need to leave something on the table. That's important for an exit strategy. Like any deal, really. Both parties have got to feel that they've been a bit screwed. There's everybody wanting a bit more, but you've got to leave something ahead for the new owners to kind of believe if you've maxed out all the growth, that's a pretty unexciting investment. So how do you, rather than be too greedy and grab it all, how do you, sell while you're on the way up rather than waiting for it to sort of fizzle out, I think is important, because someone wants to invest in something that's growing that they believe they can grow even faster or carry on growing. And I do think increasingly to get exit ready as well, it's being able to convince whoever is investing in you that the brand proposition is crystal clear and well understood, so that you can almost hand it over and someone can run with it. So that's where the likes of me struggle slightly, hence why Founder and Futures come into being, because it's about getting all of the sort of crazy marketing founder types. It's about getting the kind of our sort of secret sauce out of our heads and down onto paper as best we can, so that these brands, not like boring guidelines, but that you just feel that you are actually able to articulate it really clearly, and that actually it's a much bigger thing than the people who've been involved, and it should be able to thrive without you. Helpful if they might want you to be involved a bit. Like,
I think, again, we're linking this back to this Seth Godin bit, because it's just so fresh in my mind, but like, what he does is he's very good at he kind of does that sizzle of marketing, but what he'll do at the end of his book, he's got 12 questions, and one of the things, or 12 like sort of principles, and one of the things is you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Which is quite a big heady thing, right? But basically what he's saying is never forget you're part of this system. And we're so sort of self-obsessed that we're just like, oh my god, I'm stuck in traffic. It's like, mate, you are traffic. It's like quite a weird, but it unhinges your thinking from these guardrails of kind of not monotony, but just trained ways of doing things. And it's just kind of like, again, Rory Sutherland. That's basically what he does. Is the opposite of a good idea is a good idea. And I think there's just ways, these little sort of questions that you can. I think questions are what founders are so good at. As you said, like question everything. I think the sizzle is actually what questions would Julian asked. What questions would, I don't know.
I think founders are good at bigger picture, longer term thinking as well. They're not. Well, I mean, everyone's different, but I just think a lot of the really good founders are thinking about how do you build something that's enduring and that will be really fit for the future, rather than just is it going to hit the targets in 18 months' time. So they apply they definitely have a longer term perspective, I think, on decision making. I mean, Nandos is it's a big business. It's privately owned. Totally different behaviours to a business that's in the city thinking about how it hits its targets next quarter. Doesn't mean they're any less commercial. In fact, they're really on the detail, but they're thinking about investments with a longer term perspective. And actually they want in 10 years time that business to be even stronger, but fit for the next generation to kind of take it on. So I think that screens out some of the really crappy decisions that often happen on brands that are a bit short term and opportunistic.
Mate, let's wrap that up. We've been going for ages, but we could talk about this for another 2.5 hours. As always, just an absolute joy to sit with you, mate. There's just, my brain's just the way your genius is the way you can link everything together. It's marketing is everything. The mental availability. It's been an absolute joy.
Yeah, well, good to see you. And yeah, well done on the continued hungry machine. All right.